The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for April the 5th, 2016 is now in session. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda is approved for tonight's meeting. I need a motion, council, to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Need a second for that.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. David Cole. I think we have employee recognition that includes you. Good evening, David.
Good evening, David.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. These are the fun things that I enjoy doing as the chief. First thing I'd like to do is recognize our master police officer, Jeremy Helmerite. Give you a little bit of background. Jeremy was born and raised from this area. He's got a total of 14 years of service in law enforcement. 9 of those were with the town of Southern Shores. We were successful at stealing him from Manteo 9 years ago. He's also one of our certified state firearms instructors, and he's also our certified sniper as well. And I'm honored and privileged to present him tonight with his advanced law enforcement certificate, just to give you an idea of what that entails. In North Carolina, the Criminal Justice Standards Commission, when they issue these, the officers have to meet very strict guidelines. Some of those strict requirements are a combination of both education, training, and their law enforcement experience. Jeremy's had over 1,000 hours of training just to obtain this certification. So without further ado, I would like to have Jeremy come on up front and present him with his advanced certificate.
Congratulations, Jeremy. Well deserved and well earned. Congratulations. Good job.
I'll be right back. I'm also honored and privileged to present Officer Eddie McKeever. Eddie, probably out of all the officers here, they all smile, but this guy will smile even when he writes you a ticket, and you'll feel warm and fuzzy all over after he gives you the ticket. Eddie's just a good, all-around individual. I'd like to tell you that Eddie has 6 years of full service. One of those years was with Nags Head, and the rest, the other 5 years, obviously, were with the town of Southern Shores. We're very fortunate to have Eddie as one of our police officers, and I'd like to have him and his wife, Jessica, come on up front. Better be smiling. seems like 5 years, doesn't it? Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Meredith Guns, Assistant Planning Director of the Town of Peel Devil Hills. She's going to talk to us about Historic Landmarks Designation Program for the state of North Carolina. Good afternoon, Ms. Guns.
I don't need to turn my back on you. It's so bad, but
Wait a minute.
it's much taller than me.
Just bend it, I think.
There we go. Thank you for having me tonight. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you about our historic landmark program here in Kill Devil Hills, your neighboring town. Our program was started by ordinance in 2004. The ordinance was adopted. I've passed the ordinance out for you guys to look at. Ordinance was approved by the state and adopted by our board in 2004. Our first designation, however, wasn't until 2006. It took 2 years to have our first designation for many reasons. First, we had to establish a commission, establish the guidelines of the commission. We had to do an inventory of the entire town to create a comprehensive list of houses or structures, businesses that potentially could be landmarks in our town. What's a landmark? A landmark is very different than most other historic programs. A landmark is based on the architecture of the structure and its historic character and history in your town. So we did the inventory, we sorted the inventory by timelines and by different building patterns that happened in Kill Devil Hills. Kill Devil Hills started being built up in the 30s, had a big building boom in the 60s, had another building boom in the 80s. We've only designated houses that are 60s and below. We have not gotten into any of the younger houses, but some of the younger houses are on our list for future, to keep on the list to look at in the future. And then we did outreach to those houses, to some of the owners of what we considered, or the commission considered, the most important houses, the Frank Stick houses, the Millionaire Row houses on the ocean front. So again, a local historic landmark is a designation based on an individual structure. It's not based on anything around it. It's based on the individual structure and its individual architectural character and history. This is not a historic district. The town of Kill Devil Hills looked at a historic district when the Diane St. Clair Bomb House was demolished. That's what started the whole process. The board at the time was very upset that that historic structure on the ocean front was demolished. And we looked at a district, and Kill Devil Hills didn't qualify for a district. We're way too young to qualify for a district. It's not a state recognized historic inventory. It's not a federally recognized historic inventory. They're very different, and they're much more intense and restrictive than a local designation. I'll give you a brief understanding of how and who we designate. We send out letters to owners that are that the commission is interested based on the inventory. We send out about 10 to 20 letters a year. We hope to designate 2 or 3 structures a year. It is a lot of work to designate a structure. It's a lot of staff work, and it's a lot of work for the owners to give us the history. The general statutes that allow towns to do historic designation, local historic designation, does not require owner consent. You can designate a structure without the owner's consent to designate it. However, that's not been Kill Devil Hills from the beginning. We only designate structures with the owner's consent so that we can get the history and they want to participate. It makes the designation process a little slower because some owners don't want to be designated. So like I said, we send out 10 or 20 letters a year. Only about 2 or 3 are really interested in the program. And we don't designate those that aren't. There are houses that the commission really, really wants to designate, but the owners aren't interested. Because from the beginning, this was to promote a good relationship among the preservation, that people wanted to be in it and they wanted to preserve their home. They weren't forced to do it. The designation process is the staff has to go to the Dare County Register of Deeds. We do a complete deed research from when the land was first subdivided to its current owner. Once that deed research is done, we contact the current owner and every owner that's alive before that to try to get a complete comprehensive history of the house. Any changes to the structure, any additions, who owned it, whoever stayed there, what kind of character, what storms it went through, was someone in a storm when it happened, what were the stories behind that structure, how long had it been there, and why was it built? Why did they come to Kill Devil Hills? There was nobody here. It was a spit of sand. One person had to come because their doctor said they had to get out of Elizabeth City because their blood pressure was too high. Every one weekend, every month, his doctor prescribed him to come to the beach. So he built a house and he came to the beach once a month because of his blood pressure. No medicine, just had to come to the beach. Once we have all that history in the deed, we write a comprehensive report that includes the architectural description of the house, how it was built, what kind of architecture was used, and the history and character of the house. That's then sent to the state, and I understand Scott Powers might come talk to y'all at a future date. He reviews those reports. He gives us a non-binding opinion about the house, meaning that it doesn't really, not that it doesn't matter. He can't say yay or nay, but he tells us if the history that we've produced is strong enough for if a future owner challenged our designation, would it stand up in court that it met the criteria to be a local historic landmark? We take those very seriously, and we've not designated a couple structures in town because their opinion was that it did not meet the criteria that the state had set out. Once we have that report and his opinion back, we write an ordinance. The ordinance is then heard a public hearing by the commission, goes to the Board of Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners also holds a public hearing. And ultimately, the Board of Commissioners decides that the house is designated. So then the staff takes that ordinance to the Register of Deeds and records it, and it becomes part of the land record for that house. Kill Devil Hills has designated 28 homes so far since we started in 2006. 29 technically, 1 was demolished. We designate ranging from the large oceanfront millionaire row homes that were developed by Frank Stick, and if you're not familiar with that particular area, it's between First Street and Landing Drive. There's a red and white cottage, there's a cedar shake cottage with yellow shutters. They were the original Frank Stick homes that were done, known as millionaire row homes. We also have designated small Avalon flat tops that were built by Robert Young and Shug York. That was an entire development era in the town of Kill Devil Hills in the late 50s, early 60s. And there's not many left that have not had roofs put on them or been torn down for larger structures, because most of them range between 550 and 620 square feet. Not exactly your luxury beach home. We've designated structures in all areas of town. We've done it. We have structures on the west side, between the highways and on the ocean front. We didn't solely concentrate on the ocean front, and that was the commission's decision to try to get a historic landmark program that encompassed the history, the entire history of the town of Kill Devil Hills, and not just our original oceanfront history. So their goal was to create to preserve the unique environment and community that we enjoy. We are working on 2 structures right now for designation, and hopefully we'll have them done. They have to be done by December 31st recorded. So the whole process takes probably 2.5, 3 months. It's not for for your staff. It's not for the faint of heart. It is a good process to go through. You learn very, very cool things, and you get to know your area very well, but it is a lot of work. What restrictions come once a landmark's designated? Anybody who is interested in becoming a landmark wants to know, what does that mean? How much control do you have? The designation is not on the interior of the structure. It's purely the exterior of the structure and where the structure is located on the property. If you're going to do a major addition or a renovation to the exterior of the structure, you have to go through an additional step by getting a certificate of appropriateness from the commission before you can go through the regular building permit process. We have allowed 6 additions on historic structures so far. The additions by ordinance and by statute have to be in the same architectural theme as the original structure. It can't look like, you know, the purple elephant sticking out of this old house. It's got to fit, and I would beg you to go and look at some of the ones we've done and decide which ones had additions and which ones didn't, because the people that want to be in this program don't want to change their houses, but some of them's kitchens only had the ice box, literally the ice box where you drop the ice in it, and a 2-burner stove. That doesn't cut it anymore when you've got kids, grandkids coming down. So they needed a bigger kitchen, or, you know, so they bumped a wall out 3 feet, or they did a bedroom addition for the grandkids, things like that. Regular maintenance and repair is administrative approval by the town staff and does not have to go to the commission, so that doesn't take a designee any longer. Another thing that is important to designees is, can they get out of the program? That's a tricky question. They can apply for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish the house. The commission by statute can delay that demolition by 1 year to allow for fair market purchase of the property either by the commission or by a citizen. If that doesn't happen, then the owner can demolish the house, and the house will be taken out of the listing. What does a homeowner get? What are the benefits the homeowner gets? I just told them what restrictions they get. The benefits they get is 50% off of their taxes. That is town and county taxes. So their tax bill gets cut in half. It is called a tax deferral. Back to that demolished thing. If they demolish the house, they have to pay 3 years of that deferred tax back. If they're in the program for 20 years, they only have to pay 3 years back. If they're in the program for 1 year, they only have to pay 1 year back. But the most they have to pay is 3 years of the deferred tax back to the county and to the town if they demolish a historic structure. So far, our program has received a very positive response, and we hope it continues to see that positive response. We will have our open house. I gave you the ordinance. I also gave you one of our booklets, our historic booklets. We print those every 2 years, so there's a supplement page in it that'll include the 2015 and 2016 designated houses. There's 4 on a separate sheet. We will reprint the programs next year. We have our open house the day before Southern Shores does their flat top tour. It's going to be on April 22nd. It's free to the public, and it's from 3 to 5, and we'll have maps at Town Hall if you'd like to go and look at any of our, and this is something that the owners, because they want to be in this program, they open their houses. We ask them to open their houses. They're not required to. We go and we ask them, and usually we'll get between 8 and 10 that'll open their house. Some are, you know, one had a wedding, one, you know, whatever. But we're close with the owners. They call us, we talk to them, we know them, they know us, and it's been a really good experience for the town. And I share with you the town's experience with it. I'm not trying to win you over on the program, but it has been good for the town of Kittleville Hills, and it's been well received by both the owners, the town, and the board. And I'll answer any questions. I'll try to make it brief. I know y'all have got a busy meeting tonight.
I have a couple of questions. The reason that Meredith's here this evening, as you probably guessed, is we've had a lot of interest recently in our flat tops and preserving them if we possibly can. And because of that, we wanted to have her come in and talk to us about some of the steps that have to be followed. one of the criteria for this, for your commission that you have to establish is that you have to have residents, at least 3 residents of the town that the historic landmark might be in, which in this case a flat top or flat tops. Did you have any problem fulfilling that requirement, or?
Getting commission members?
Yes.
No, sir.
Pretty, not complicated.
It was, we had several applications when the commission was first developed. Again, remember our commission, and if y'all did one, your commission would probably have the same type of interest right now because you have a very intense public interest in preserving,
Right.
or you just had something demolished that no one wanted to see demolished, right? We had the Diane St. Clair Bomb House, and people chained themselves to it, literally chained themselves to it. So there was a lot of interest and a lot of public push to preserve. So we had a lot of applications to begin with. One thing that we did that I probably wouldn't recommend that you do is put term limits on our commission. We put term limits of 2 terms, and then you had to have one term off, and then you could come back on. I probably wouldn't do that again.
You did that, that's not required by the state?
It's
You
not
just did
required
that.
by the
Okay.
state. That's something that the board did at the time. And over time, we still get applications. We've kept our board full. We've never had a vacant seat, but the applications aren't nearly as plenty as they were in 2004.
Anyone else have questions?
No, I don't have any.
Peter, you have anything you want to add?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think if y'all have an interest in it, either during this meeting or future meetings, I think the next step would be to, if there is interest in moving ahead, is directing the town attorney and the town manager and the town planner to maybe come up with a plan to bring back to council, outlining steps, and then y'all can take it from there, but if there's interest in doing that.
Council, would you prefer to do that tonight or not? Or
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I'd like to see what the process is.
So with council's concurrence, I'll direct the town manager and the town attorney to go ahead and proceed with that. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Meredith. Where did you go?
Right there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This time we'll open public comment. Jerry Sullivan. Good afternoon, Jerry.
Jerry Sullivan, 31 10th Avenue in Southern Shores. Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to offer the following thoughts as you review the street rebuild standards listed on your agenda. First, our land use plan stormwater management policy, item 7, states, encourage the use of low-impact development, vegetative buffers to filter stormwater, impervious surface limits, and innovative, and I want to emphasize innovative, stormwater management alternatives to reduce runoff and improve water quality. Do our current road rebuild standards support this policy? I did a little bit of investigation. There's the NCSU guidebook, followed by a number of communities in our state, defines a number of low-impact development standards that can reduce costs and protect the environment, including reducing the street width and length, require low-impact development for managing stormwater, remove curb and gutter requirements, and allow or require vegetated swales, require minimum tree densities or percent forest coverage, and allow mulch trails through green spaces instead of sidewalks. Are we following these best practices? Finally, the first item in our street rebuild standards calls for utilizing low-impact development systems and maximizing preservation of existing natural hydraulic conditions where feasible. Are we following these standards? As you review our current road rebuild standards, I would like our council to consider: 1, I know you're going to evaluate and select a town engineer. Make sure he's local and familiar with our environment as well as low-impact development practices. Secondly, Tommy Carroll made a suggestion at the last meeting that we hire an arborist to work with our staff in evaluating what, if any, trees should be removed when working on capital improvement projects. And finally, put a hold on any street rebuilds until the town engineer is selected and a long-range plan is developed. My goal is not to stop capital improvements, but rather make our town a model that can be followed by other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Andy Ward. Good afternoon, Andy.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, staff, didn't have much time to prepare. I just jumped up and came, but just kind of laying the table for possible public forum comment that I might make after the meeting that you're going to have. But anyway, what I have in my hand here is a page off Dare County tax site that shows a house that was built at Merlot Beach in Rodanthe in 2005. How does that pertain to us? Well, this house is 5,946 feet. It has 12 bedrooms. It has 11 baths and 2 half baths. Why I'm up here talking about this, I think we know that in January we passed a ZTA by a 3-2 margin that says we can strike the septic capacity and have 6,000 square feet. I still feel that was a huge mistake on the 3 that voted for it, and I just would like to revisit that when I go to speak at Town Forum. But just looking quickly on VRBO, which is Vacation Rental by Owner site, and on Airbnb, currently, right now, there are 15 properties advertised in Southern Shores that have a sleeping capacity of 16 to 24 people. Before that law was passed, we could write them a letter and say they were in violation of our 14 limit septic capacity. Now we can't. Those properties, out of those 15 properties, 4 have a capacity advertised at 18, 4 have a capacity advertised at 20, one of which is at 46 Ocean Boulevard, next door to the house my family's building. By the way, 6 bedrooms, capacity of 12. And one is a 22 bedroom or 22 capacity house. So my question is later on, how do we possibly alleviate that getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Terry Vandermeide. Good evening, Terry.
I'm Terry Vandermeide. I live at 261 North Dogwood Trail. And I just have a few almost historical comments to back up what Jerry said, in that it seems to me what's been happening with the roads in the past has been predicated on the NCDOT standards. And having looked at those and looked at the money spent complying with those, it seems to me we have ended up spending their part of the money to do their requirements, which still leaves us having to fix the roads with our own money. I don't think that that makes much sense if the things that they're requiring aren't necessary for a coastal community in the first place. We have sandy soil, we have a lovely tree cover, we're the envy of all the other areas that I can see, and we're ruining it. We don't need to do that. Let NCDOT keep their requirements where they're needed, where cities have sewer systems that require drainage and gutters, and they don't have sandy soil, and leave us to what we do best, which is to keep a simple, lovely, quiet life and not overdo it because DOT says we must. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, I'll close public comment. And a report from our town planner. Thank you, Wes. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I have a report for you tonight for the month of March. And there were 15 zoning permits issued, 43 building permits issued. Those consisted of 4 additions, 5 remodels, 6 repairs, 1 remodel repair, 7 accessories, and 20 others. There are currently 17 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees collected in March was $7,048.33. With respect to the planning board, the April 18th planning board meeting, there will be a review, a variance application review, which is a request seeking relief from a side setback requirement in the RS1 zoning district. Any questions?
Council? Thank you, Wes.
Thank y'all.
Chief Cole? Good evening again.
Good evening. Can I go now? Thank you. First thing I want to cover is the monthly report for the month of March 2016. As you can see, we've had 939 calls for service. That's up about 82 calls for service compared to last year for the same month. You can see a breakdown of some of the incidents were actual crimes that were reported. There were 46 of those. Criminal arrest, we had 27 of those. We had 4 motor vehicle accidents. Officers handed out 27 written citations and another 70 warning citations. And we also had 3 ordinance violations that were written for the month of March 2016. A couple of other things that I'd like to mention. One, I think, has already hit the Outer Banks voice, but there's 2 news releases that I want to bring you up to date on. One that I'm very happy to finally be able to report. For over a year and a half, almost 2 years, we had a rash of thefts and larcenies from mailboxes around Christmas time. And that included them stealing cash, Christmas cards, gifts, and anything that came through the mail or UPS or FedEx. And after a lengthy investigation and a lot of surveillance time, we were able to identify the suspects and then subsequently arrest them. And finally, because it was a federal offense, we have been notified that one of the 2 suspects, they were a husband and wife, Travis Wimett and Christine Wimett, that were residing on Holly at the time. Travis has pled guilty. He'll serve 15 months in federal prison with 3 years of probation on top of that. And Christine will be pleading in the near future. They're also ordered to pay restitution of $1,495.30. But some of the things that you're not aware of, for example, there was a jersey that was signed and a grandfather had sent it to his grandson. Anything that wasn't cash, they just burned it in a burn barrel, so there's no price on those types of things. But anyway, the federal government finally came through. It only took them 2.5 years. So anyway, the other one, our officers responded to Wells Fargo Bank and Southern Bank on March 23rd around 2:30 in the afternoon for what's a flim-flam scam in which both banks lost several $1,000s in a scam. Our officers were quick enough to obtain information, descriptions, and we put a attempt to locate out. And Dare County deputies, we had information they had tried to hit two banks in Kill Level Hills. We received information that they were currently in the Manio area, so we put the locate out. Deputies observed them, stopped them, and held them for us. And the short gist of it is when we did finally take them into custody, they still had some of the money on them, and they were arrested. To the best of our knowledge, they're still in Dare County jail. And they were all from Romania, so we're also working very closely with Immigration and Homeland Security because we can't substantiate whether they're here legally or not. So you'll be reading those in the paper. I wanted to give you all a heads up before that.
Thank you.
The other thing I would like to present to you is the 2015 annual police report. Anyone in the audience, they're welcome to stop by the police department and obtain a copy of it, and we'll also make it available on our website as well.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
That's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Any questions, council?
Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think we have Mr. Carlson here tonight to give the fire department report. Good afternoon.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before I get into the report, I'm going to give a little brief synopsis of myself because that's the first time I've been in front of the board tonight. My name is Ronnie Carlson. I'm the Deputy Chief at Southern Shores Fire Department. I've been Deputy Chief for over a year now. I've been a member of the department since 2009. I moved here in 2008 to Southern Shores. I was transferred down here for the company I work for, which is Dominion North Carolina Power. I've been a supervisor there for 8 years. I'm also been with the Dominion now, as of this month, 26 years. Moving forward with this, the report. In March of 2016, we had 35 calls total. I'm gonna break them down for you. First one we had was one building fire, 25 EMS calls, one motor vehicle accident, one overheated motor, which is more like your AC or heating unit, one good intent, one dispatch and canceled en route, two smoke scare, one smoke detector activation due to malfunction, one smoke detector activation due to unintentional, and one alarm system activation, which was also unintentional. And another note on that, from March 2015, I'll go ahead and repeat that for you too. We're right in line with that. As of March 2015 of last year, we had 39 calls. So we're about averaging the same calls per year right now. That's all I have for the report. Any questions?
Any questions, council?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Carlson. Appreciate it. At this time, I'll ask our town manager to brief us on the town standard used for infrastructure improvements. Mr. Resco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I did want to say something about the deputy chief. He's a busy man. Ronnie is, as he said, works for North Carolina Power, and he also does a lot for the community as a volunteer. He stays busy a lot, so we're lucky to have him then. Been asked to brief the council tonight on the street, three different standards. One, street rebuild standards, our canal bulkhead maintenance standards, and also our right-of-way brush removal standards, which do comprise our infrastructure work in Southern Shores. I will say at the beginning that, of course, Southern Shores has nearly 40 miles of public streets. They were all previously built by private developers using little or no standards at the time. Most had either substandard base or no base, as we discover each time we do a street repair or rebuild. That translates into 80 linear miles of town right-of-way boundaries that Public Works is responsible for. Most of the right-of-ways in Southern Shores are 60 feet wide. They do vary. There are a handful that are 100 feet wide. Most of the paved streets are hardly ever in the center of the right-of-way in this town. I don't think there's been one in the center since I've been here for 6 years that we worked on. None of these streets, when they originally developed, had any stormwater management features at the time of their original installation. These standards, and we'll scroll down them as we go, these standards have been used by the town's designer in some form since at least 2008, and all were more recently endorsed in this more clarifying and explanatory format recently. These are standards used for those streets that have been determined that need to be rebuilt in town. In other words, completely taken out and put back in because of their actual condition. Not merely continuing to have to repave a street. As we've noticed and seen over the years, repaving of a street with no base or limited base or substandard base means we usually come back 2 years later with town funds to have to repave or do some more work again. I will note that these standards are not required by DOT. These are not DOT required standards. The only standard required by DOT in order for us to receive Power Bill funds is for a street to be public and for it to be an average of 16 feet wide. As you'll see in a minute, most of the streets in Southern Shores are 18 feet wide. Going down the beginning of the standards that the designer uses and has used for rebuild of streets in Southern Shores, the very first one, the designer uses appropriate and adequate stormwater management using best management practices and low-impact development systems, and maximizes the preservation of existing natural hydrologic conditions where feasible. What the last clause means, of course, is that there's a fall or a drop, he attempts to use that rather than piping and collection. I will say that this designer, that at least for the last 6 years since I've been here, has included low-impact designs and BMPs as are published by the various industries for stormwater management. 2 years ago, we actually received the advice and consult from a sustainable design specialist for the Coastal Studies Institute for 2 of the major projects that were being conducted that year to make sure that he concurred that low-impact design systems were in fact being incorporated into Southern Shores designs, which he did. So that is the number one, the first standard that we use. I will say that we get more complaints in this town for standing stormwater on streets or flowing stormwater on streets than any other complaint. There's no question, and that is the number one complaint we get. The second standard, the designer attempts to realign the center line in relation to existing right-of-way where practical. Realign all roadway center line alignments to eliminate roadway encroachments onto private property. And reconstruction designs will maximize the preservation of existing trees, bulkheads, and vegetated medians when practical without adversely affecting public safety. As I said before, hardly any street in this town lies down the center line of a right-of-way. We actually have to have a street survey conducted prior to a capital improvement project or rebuild project on that street to determine exactly where the boundaries are. 9 times out of 10, there are encroachments within the town right-of-way. Adjacent property owners, of course, nobody knows where the property lines are, and they have utilized that particular right-of-way as part of the yard, which is common. But to be able to use that road and perform the project, we have to know the exact parameters of where the actual right-of-way is, and most of the time that street is either to the left or to the right of the actual right-of-way. So one of the standards is for them to realign the center line where practical. However, the standard was incorporated and approved by council to allow for the reconstruction designs to maximize the preservation of existing trees, bulkheads, and vegetated medians. And so the designer does attempt to do that each time, and we've got a handful of streets that have been, that standard has been utilized on in the last 2 years, one of which is North Dogwood Trail. That particular street lies to the east side of the right-of-way, and in doing so, and keeping it on that side, several trees were saved. I believe only one tree that was storm damaged had to be taken out for that particular street rebuild. Number 3, the street curves shall be designed in accordance with the NCDOT standards. And again, this is incorporating the standards by reference. This is not a requirement. So this is what has been used by the town for the rebuild. Street curves shall be designed in accordance with NCDOT standards in all locations where these standards can be met within the configuration of the existing right-of-ways. Reconstruction designs will again maximize the preservation of existing trees, bulkheads, and vegetated medians where practical without adversely impacting public safety. The curves themselves are the DOT standards that the designer goes by are based on speed, design speed, and terrain, the terrain being whether it's level, hilly, or rolling. So there's a standard in there for the radius of the curves. So far, that has not been a big challenge for any designer in Southern Shores as far as a normal street. Number 4, street widths shall be designed in accordance with NCDOT standards. Reconstruction designs will maximize the preservation of existing trees, bulkheads, and vegetated medians when practical without adversely impacting public safety. Again, the designer goes by, has flexibility in his design in attempting to preserve existing trees. As I said before, the average street width in Southern Shores is 18 feet. There are a handful of streets that are 16 feet or less. That is asphalt to asphalt, which means you divide that in half and you get a travel lane. So an 18-foot asphalt to asphalt would be 2 9-foot wide travel lanes. That is what most of the streets in the town are. There are some that are a handful. There are a few that are 20 feet wide, which means there's a 10-foot travel lane. And again, that's asphalt to asphalt. There's no street in town that's greater than 20 feet, except for there is a overlook section on what some people refer to as Harry's Hump at the top of Hillcrest, I believe. It has an observation portion that makes asphalt to asphalt wider. That's not considered part of the street. There has been no street widening, at least in my tenure since I've been here. No street has been widened. I keep seeing that in blogs, publications, letters. We don't know where our street has actually been widened. Asphalt to asphalt, again, is the standard for the width. So every street in town in Southern Shores is a narrow street in accordance with all the publications that have ever been seen by us or by the designer or by any of the consultants that we've ever conferred with. These are narrow streets, not one over 20 feet. Number 5, the cul-de-sacs or other NCDOT recognized turnaround areas are adequately sized to facilitate the maneuvering of the town's fire apparatus installed in all locations where the roadway or right-of-way has no outlet. Cul-de-sacs shall be considered in all locations where the existing right-of-way is platted for or otherwise supports the inclusion of this feature. In locations where adequate area is not available and the need for a larger turnaround is necessary, the town may investigate other design options. Again, this is not a required DOT standard. We incorporate the NCDOT standards into the town standards is what has happened. Typically, the standard is 70-foot radius. Many of the areas in Southern Shores cannot achieve a 70-foot radius, and because of the language of the standard, the designer has come off of that, and there are 2 at least that have happened in the last 6 years that are 60 feet. If we cannot put that in there, then we've looked at acquiring property on either side of the turnaround, which has been done in the last 3 years. There have been citizens who granted the town easements for the turnaround. So in those particular locations, either it's a smaller cul-de-sac or we've been able to achieve the standard for the garbage trucks, the fire trucks, and school buses to make the turn. Number 6 is where the designer goes back to the second standard. Having done all he can to save those resources, the trees, the bulkhead, and the vegetated medians, and at the same time trying to realign the street to get it out of somebody's yard or get the private encroachments out of the street. He's done all he can on number 2, then he drops back to number 6, which is the tree removal standard that is used. Having considered realignment of the center line while maximizing preservation of existing trees, when practical without adversely impacting public safety, remove trees and tree stumps under the following conditions. Again, I think the premise has been with the designer. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a designer, but I've worked with the ones that the town has used. This particular standard has been applied for the purpose of public safety and street maintenance. All trees and tree stumps within 4 feet of the edge of the road pavement metrics of the rebuilt street. Trees and tree stumps located within the proposed stormwater management areas. Trees and tree stumps impacted by roadway grading. Trees and tree stumps known to be in direct conflict with underground utility lines and the related above-ground utility appurtenances, and all trees and stumps that compromise the line of sight at roadway intersections. Again, the designer is bound by the flexibility language in number 2, and he's done all he can in number 2, and he drops back to this standard. And I'll show some photographs real quick. If Sheila can help me real quick at this particular point in the standards. Yeah, this shows a street in 2011 after completion, and this is showing you that where the 4-foot clearance area on either side of asphalt. Significant number of trees in this particular curve were removed, and this shows the resulting street rebuild. Next. This shows a street rebuilt in 2012, Gray Squirrel, and I put this in to show you that in less than in less It shows you the Gray Squirrel Lane. This is a 4-year-old rebuild. That pine tree is 10 feet away. And so what we've got now on the east side of Gray Squirrel is already being uprooted. That's in 2012. Again, same particular section of Gray Squirrel. This is a tree on Fairway Drive that shows you a typical root upheaval. This is absolutely no base under this particular. This was a private driveway converted to a public street. Next. And this is Pintail Court, showing the effect of roots underneath a particular street. This is the street that's under rebuild currently, Beech Tree, and I showed this. This is prior to, this is actually beginning of the fall, prior to tree removal, okay? And this is the same curve after tree removal. That street is under rebuild right now. Should be completed by the end of May. Next. Looking north on Beech Tree, beginning of the fall or late fall. Next. Go anyway, that particular street is under rebuild at this particular point in time, and you'll see that 4-foot lane on either side of that street as well. Okay. So I'll go to standard number 7. Asphalt and road base shall be designed to meet NCDOT standards and geotechnical recommendations. Each time we do a particular street rebuild, we have to engage a geotechnical engineer to come in and do borings on every particular street, and either they'll hit peat or not, or they'll hit sand or not. And that particular boring will tell us what's below and what the existing base is, if any. Typically, there is no base. There's always a default on the findings of the geotechnical engineer as to what type of base to put down, road base to put down, and of course the asphalt type and technique. Number 8, construction installation methods and specifications shall be implemented according to DOT standards. That's just the construction installation methods, and again, we incorporate, the standards incorporate the DOT standards. Not required, but they incorporate them by reference. Number 9, revegetation needs shall be evaluated at 6 months and 12 months following project completion. And this was a new one, the new standard that the council incorporated last year for projects forward. A landscaping plan shall be developed, if appropriate, utilizing primary native species of shrubs and small trees. The Public Works Director at this time evaluates every project for landscaping needs throughout, and comes back at 6 months and 12 months, if appropriate. And I'll say that small trees and shrubs are what are utilized if a plan is put in place, not large trees back in the town right of way. So those are the actual street rebuild standards. And what I'd like to do real quickly is present you with an example of what the Public Works Department uses for standards right here. We actually have standards for brush removal on street right-of-ways. What you have is overgrowth that comes out into the right-of-way, preventing walkers from actually using that shoulder if they have to get off of the streets. You can see in this particular location, in that location, it has grown out. And what we try to do is have at least a 3-foot clearance beside the asphalt and a 6 to 7 foot height clearance so somebody can step off the street if necessary and get out of the way of traffic. So that shows you that mower, and we actually do it we do some by hand and some by mower. Okay. The last set of standards basically are unwritten, but these are standards for the bulkhead protection. I will say that the town owns 3,800 feet of bulkhead in town on 5 different streets. The town inherited these bulkheads when the homeowners association, civic association, deeded all the streets to Southern Shores after incorporation. So the town does own 3,800 feet of bulkhead on 5 streets. They being Yopon, Wild Swan, Tall Pine, Osprey, and Holly. We have tried over the years to keep those up. Basically, the standard is if a tree has an obvious effect on the bulkhead, if it is visible, then that tree is again removed. And Public Works does use the standard of going and digging and confirming that there is root push out on a particular bulkhead. As you can see in this bulkhead, it is pushed out. That is the forensic photograph of it, showing you the roots of a tree as they look, then they're pushing against the bulkhead. Again, you can see the obvious bowing of the tree. Yep. So the obvious trees that are affecting the town asset and pushing it out are removed. In this particular case, the sheet piling was cracked, had already been cracked, and was being pushed out, and they were removed. So we have 5 different bulkhead locations in town, one of which, on Wild Swan, the bulkhead has actually had to be replaced last year. Right now, it is around $190 a foot. So that's what we're looking at 3,800 feet to protect that asset. Once they have to come out and be replaced, most of the time, all the trees within a 4 to 6 foot distance of the bulkhead have to be removed in order to get the tiebacks down. So that's the challenge we're facing, and the Public Works has left as many trees as possible in place along bulkheads, but most of those that are growing, as you see right there, over the top of the bulkhead, when it's obvious to Public Works, they are pulled out. We did consult with a structural engineer on one of the streets, Wild Swan, and went through step by step with the structural engineer as to each tree in that location, and make sure that it is obvious to Public Works as to what trees affect a bulkhead and what don't. So that's what they go by. Those are the standards that we use for infrastructure protection. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you, Peter. You saw the situation here on what's it called, the Cormorant Canal, which is on Beechtree. Last fall, Mr. Esco and Mrs. Patrick and I took a canal tour, which we pretty much covered the entire canal system, primarily looking for navigation problems, where trees had fallen in the water or limbs had been left in the water. Spent, I would say, about 4 hours out there. And one of the things we noticed when we came up the Cormorant Canal, which is a canal between Beechtree and Holly, serves those properties. We noticed the condition of that bulkhead at that time, and Mrs. Patrick made note of that, and I'm sure followed up on her observations from that visit last fall. That led to the tree removal on that particular canal system, canal bulkhead. Council, any questions?
Yeah, I've got lots of questions. First of all, noting what you showed us on the canals, I see why some of the trees were removed. I don't understand why all of them had to be removed, because I personally went over and looked at the bulkhead, and one picture you failed to show, Peter, was the one where someone, I don't know when, in the past, developed a way to save a tree, and the way they did it was they built like a triangle coming out from the bulkhead, and that tree has obviously been saved. And what I don't understand is why we couldn't be more creative in the way we manage those bulkheads and potentially build the bulkhead out around that tree, because of the ones I saw in the pictures you showed us, yeah, the trees were causing problems. The roots were kicking the bulkhead out. But I looked further at that bulkhead, and in some cases it was rotten anyway, and that section needed rebuilding. And that's where I'm saying, couldn't we have possibly extended that bulkhead out beyond that tree and repaired it rather than cut the tree down? I mean, that's an option. I don't know how cost-effective it is. It may not be cost-effective, but that's an analysis, that I think should be done before we just cut them down.
May I respond? You see a picture up there. Not all the trees came off the bulkhead.
No, I understand.
Not all, there were a
but I
lot
got a
of
thumb drive in my pocket that shows a picture of that tree that was saved by someone.
All the trees you see standing there were saved, and that's only about a third of the bulkhead looking to the south. So there were more trees were saved than taken out.
Well, and that's good, but my point is, I understand that CAMA will allow us to go 2 feet out into the canal with our bulkheads. And so if we did that, we would have saved a lot of those trees you had to take down. Now, what the cost would be, I don't know. That's
about $190 a foot.
Yeah, but what does it cost to remove a tree? It's not cheap either. time you.
The thing you're
cut it.
not acknowledging, Fred, is the tree doesn't stop growing when you move the bulkhead 2 feet further out.
Well,
The roots don't stop penetrating.
I didn't say they did.
Well, but you're going to have the same problem again in 3 to 5 or 7 years, where the tree is crushing the bulkhead once again. You're not solving the problem. What happened, the tree was either planted by somebody else or grew there on its own.
Yeah.
And there was no provision made when it first started to grow to protect that bulkhead.
Well, my understanding that tree roots go where there's the least resistance, and if the bulkhead's starting to rot out, obviously it's going to go that direction. Otherwise, it's going to go somewhere else. Now, that's my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong, and if I am, that's my opinion, though. But going back to street rebuild standards, I do have some questions there, and I see a real inconsistency between number 2 and 6A. Number 2 basically says you're going to preserve existing trees as much as possible. And 6A says all trees and tree stumps within 4 feet of the edge of the road will be basically removed. And to me, that sounds kind of arbitrary. Why do you have to remove those trees? Because the trees close to the pavement or to the street do provide a lot of benefit. One, stormwater management. It helps take care of stormwater. Trees absorb stormwater, no doubt about it. 2, they do provide a safety factor, and that safety factor is it keeps that street having the appearance of being narrow. And narrow streets, and there are numerous studies that conclude that narrow streets are safer. They reduce speed. The number of fatalities on a narrow street are much less than they are on a wider street. Further, putting in curbs and gutters. I noticed at the Dogwood Trail intersection, I'm very familiar with it since I live on North Dogwood Trail. There are pipes there that are used, and that's not, it's my understanding, low-impact development. Curbs, low-impact development standards generally don't call for curbs. Curbs a lot of times will increase stormwater problems because they funnel water in a direction that the curb is on the boundary of the street. I think a good example of this is East Dogwood Trail. There are curbs at the top of that hill, and when we get strong rainstorms, those curbs help funnel that water down the street, down to NC 12. And I think Public Works has done some good things in smoothing out some of that area, and we're getting better stormwater absorption on the side of the street, but we still got curbs up there. And I don't see that we need those curbs. And I guess the bottom line, all of this is leading to the citizens of the town want to protect the ambiance of the town. And removing all these trees and putting in curbs and things you normally see in a metropolitan area are really not necessary in the town. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against street rebuild standards. These streets are, 40, 50 years old, and they do need to be rebuilt. And tearing them out, doing a better job with the base is important. But I do have a problem with taking trees down unnecessarily and putting in things that we really don't need. I think low-impact development standards are much different than the way we're doing it.
I would just respond by saying I'm not an engineer, but I can assure you that we have discussions with the designer each time to make sure he understands to incorporate low-impact design standards in each particular design. And it was because of that we got the Sustainable Design Specialist from the Coastal Studies Institute to come and review town plans. And even the one on East Dogwood intersection. And every time he said they are yes, they are low-impact design standards. I'm not an engineer, so I can't say, banter about whether we're using lids, to someone's satisfaction. I would just say it's a practice, and that practice is incorporated. As far as the trees, it is a standard. I mean, it is a 4-foot standard that has been utilized, so I can't argue one way or the other. It's just 4 feet, and that's what it is. But I will say that everything is done under standard number 2 to save that particular right-of-way existence. North Dogwood Trail is an example of that. That street was not moved to the left to the very center. We would have had to taken out 9 trees if that street had been moved to the center line. But it was in a situation where it was practical to leave it where it was because of the right-of-way on the east side. Only one storm damaged tree had to come out. So I think that's an example of how those standards work. The 4 feet has been in place by the town for years as a safety factor and for maintenance of the street. I mean, I think y'all saw the root upheaval, and that's what we run up against every single time, it seems like. And that's costly because the whole street has to come out. And I'm not an engineer, so I understand what you're saying, and that's what your position, but I'm just telling you what we do.
It's not just my position, it's the position of a lot of people in town.
Well, I've always said from the very beginning that if an engineer came in here and said, y'all can rebuild a street with a tree right beside the asphalt and nothing's going to happen in that street, then certainly that would be something else to talk about at the council. You know, that there's a professional telling you that. I've never yet run across the engineer that's done that with us in discussion, and we've talked to several and talked to experts at CSI about it. But that just has never come to us where somebody has said, you can leave a tree touching asphalt and nothing's going to happen. So that's what we've been going on.
The state requires no trees in their right-of-way at all to preserve their cost to maintain their streets and can avoid having to rebuild them. We're not even close to that. We debated a 10-foot, years ago, a 10-foot setback from the street, which was a lot more realistic in my mind. A minimum was 8 feet to allow people to escape the street in case of an oncoming traffic or avoid a car had changed lanes or lost control and forced them off the road. We, years ago, I guess, before my time, 6 years ago, compromised on a 4-foot setback from the edge of pavement. I think it's a minimal, because you saw what that loblolly pine did to gray squirrel. A loblolly pine at maturity can have a 60-foot spread of roots or more. And you don't, it goes to the path least resistance, but it also goes through things that are in the way and goes under things that are in the way. And that's a good example of that. I think our 4-foot setback is it's easy for me to defend. It's not a problem at all because I see it as something that at least gives us a few more years' life out of that new street rebuilt.
Okay, but you said state requires, Peter said state does not require. Now I need a clarification.
The state requires on their highways.
On their highway.
On their highways. Well, that's their highway out there on 12.
That's right. Well, they can't do it. There's no trees in there right away.
Well, that's confusing, and it's confusing to me. It'd be confusing to the public, I
On the
think,
state
too.
highways.
The other thing is, and I don't even really want to get in on this, but there's pros and cons on both sides of this. The bottom line is our community is tree friendly. I mean, they've shown that. They've said that. 30 years ago, I have to go back that far, I lived in Charlotte. There's options. They used to cut the roots down Queen Street so the great oaks would not run out into the road and tear the road up. There's options for that, and I'm sure engineers can come with, I don't know the cost, but there's a lot of those options. You ask about street width. I think I can answer that for you. The answer is when we put the curbing in, it increases the width of the street. And I think that's where people are saying that. I really do.
Oh, yeah.
So that's when they say we're widening roads and we put a curb in. Now, is the curbing appropriate? When I went by East Dogwood and 12 on Sunday, it looked to me like the curbing is holding the water on the road right there, and there's no way for it to get off, even though there's a little cut in there. So it's increasing our flooding on Highway 12. So just thinking, we got to look at some options. You said about the cul-de-sacs for the fire department. You know, I understand I've read that NCDOT standards and all that. Have we looked at options like connecting those roads through? Doing some things out of the box instead of just leaving it as a cul-de-sac. That probably makes some folks unhappy also, but there's ways to do things other than the way we do it. So, you know, what we need to do is look what's best and look at what our community is willing to live with and want. I think the issue, what's that? I don't even want to say the word, the road, but I think the issue is, like at North and East Dogwood, is the stormwater runoff, the swell that's there. That took out a lot of trees. There's options. You can put a drain in there, pipe it to another area where you don't see it, and maybe save some of those trees and that kind of thing. So there's options, and I think we ought to look at those, because I think that's important. I know it's important to this community. I mean, gosh, they come in here every week and say, or every month and say that. So I think we got to do those things, and we got to listen to what the folks are saying. And to just blow them off is not right, folks. I'm sorry. I have to say that. We have some options here. Peter will find those options, and I know he will. He does a good job at it. He's open to do what we need to do. And I know most of us are willing to do what needs to be done in this community to keep it the way it is. So, same thing happens on those canals too. You can't cut those roots, seen it done 30 years ago. It works, and it saves streets. So, just a few options, and I'm not an engineer either.
No.
Let me address the root pruning thing.
Sir?
Let me address the root pruning comment, because that's
It's root pruning,
that
yeah.
interests me.
Yeah, that's what it
I've
is.
done that.
I know.
Okay, I'm familiar with that.
Doesn't always
Most of
kill
us
the
have a
tree.
crepe myrtle or see crepe myrtles in the area.
Oh, yes.
You see people prune them back, prune the limbs back a little bit to shape them, and what happens? You get 2 or 3 or 4 branches come off it where you made that pruning cut. Every time. Same thing happens underground. You cut a tree root back, and it makes that tree root grow with more fibrous roots and more, they don't stop growing, they keep growing, but just more of them, over and over again.
Tom, a crepe myrtle is a bush. It's not a tree.
The crepe myrtle's a tree.
Well, that one I've got is a tree, it's no bush.
Well, it has smaller roots, it has a very fibrous root system, you're right about
But
that.
anyway, there's options, my point.
There are options, and there are methods in place, there are tools in place that allow you to contain a tree's roots. There's no question about that.
Okay.
But can you contain a tree roots when it's a 20-inch caliber tree, a 55-foot tree? Do you go back and contain those roots? No. Your root containment has to take place when you put that tree in the ground. And then you can do it pretty effectively. But I've never seen it done on a mature tree very effectively. And I've dug them up to 12 inches in diameter or 40-foot trees and transplanted them. So I just don't see that as being a viable option to go out and try to root prune every tree that's close to the street.
I didn't say every tree.
Cost and everything. We tried that on Yopon Lane.
I didn't say that on every tree, but it is an option. And, you know, the place I've seen it done, those trees were hundreds of years old. They had a root base, and they spread wide, but they do it, and it works. So, you know.
We tried it here in town on Yopon Lane, not to interrupt you, but we tried that on Yopon Lane about 2000. We repaved that street. We didn't rebuild it, we repaved it.
Okay.
And they cut the tree roots on the side of that street toward the canal. And within 5 or 6 years, the road was buckled again. The roots had come right back under it. So I'm not averse to trying to save as many trees as we can. Don't misunderstand that. I grew up with trees. I love trees. I've made my living with trees. But I think you have to manage the resource. And I think we haven't been doing that very effectively. We let the bulkhead trees go. We let the street trees go for years, never touch them. It's almost like we're afraid that we're going to make somebody mad if we cut a tree down. Well, that's important, but you also have to protect your infrastructure and your investment in your community. Anybody else have anything they want to ask Peter?
Yeah, I do. I take issue with what you said, Mayor. I think we should do everything we can to save these trees because that's what the public wants. They've made it very clear. You've seen the outcry over the Dogwood Trail. You saw it at Fairway. You saw it at Scuppernong. You've seen it other places. And the more this continues, the more you're going to see it. People are tired of it. They want us to listen. And I agree with Peter. I'm not an engineer either. My wife is, but I'm not. But arbitrarily cutting the trees back 4 feet from the road, I don't think is a good practice. Just because we've always done it doesn't mean that's the way we should do it. And I think we should let the people decide, yeah, it's going to harm the infrastructure, and if they're willing to pay for it, to save trees, then I think we should consider that. If the tree root pops that part of the pavement up, we go and we fix it. We cut that root and we fix what damage is caused. And I think trees are important. I really do.
I mean, are you prepared to, because what you're describing could potentially increase taxes? I mean, is that so valuable?
I'm not saying increase taxes. I don't see the need for curbs. Why are we spending money on curbs when we could be preserving our trees along the roadways? We want to protect the ambiance of the town, and cutting all these trees down is not doing it unnecessarily. Sometimes you got to take them down. They're dead or they're leaning over in the road. Yeah, I agree. If they're causing problems on the bulkhead, popping it out, yeah, take them down. But don't take them down just for the sake of taking down the trees. I tell you, Dogwood intersection was a disaster. It really was. And those trees did not need to be taken down. Some of them, granted, but not all of them. And my point is, we need to be more environmental friendly, and I think these standards should be reevaluated to consider these standards.
Fred, let me just say this. Tom, every paragraph says, just about every paragraph on here says preservation of existing trees, maximize preservation.
As much as possible.
It says
as
that.
much as possible.
So even when you were putting this in place, that was an issue. And, I mean, it still continues to be one. So I have to say that. I was looking at that and I'm thinking, every paragraph says that. We should be doing it. The other question I have for Peter, do we budget for revegetation? In that process, you said that, and you said that when they do it, they do every 6 to 12 months.
We look at it.
We put that in the budget
That is part of the budget.
each year as part of the.
It's part of the capital street improvement.
So we put it in the, like if we're doing the intersection of East Dogwood and North Dogwood, we put in that project the money to revegetate?
That is correct. If
Yes.
The Public Works Director follows that standard.
And I can add to that too, because in our last CIP meeting, we discussed that, and it's an ongoing thing. I mean, and initially, you can't tell when a road is done, and we were talking about whether more needed to be done on some streets. So it's a moving target, but yeah, we are looking at continuing to add vegetation back that will not harm the streets.
And I think Jerry made comment about, and I know Tommy did at the last meeting, about looking to hire an arborist. I think our forestry service has one that we could utilize if we needed to. I know the aquarium uses one. Whenever they cut some trees over there, they call the Forest Service, have the guy come out, tell them what they can do, and but their goal is to save everything they can on their property over there. So I just want to throw that in. We do have a Forest Service, and they have an arborist on staff, I think, that we could call on and probably budget in if we needed to.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not a free ride, is it? The Forest Service is going to charge us for his services.
Actually, I don't think they charge him anything.
Well, I mean, if that's
for
the
him to
case,
come
it's
out.
not a bad deal.
I had him come out, and by the way, I did cut a tree on my property. It was a pine tree, and it had beetles. He told me to burn it. But I had him come out and look at that tree, and he said, you got to take it out, and you got to get rid of it, because it'll just go to the next pine. So, yeah, and he didn't charge me anything. So, just...
Well, and I agree with what Gary just said a second ago. I mean, it seems to me that just about every line mentions the preservation of existing trees. So that and the flexibility that's built in it. I mean, this is far from a rigid document, and it has to be flexible. I mean, because there will be conditions where there is a tree against a bulkhead. Every street rebuild will be different because of the center line being in a different location, and to that point, I think that the standards, as a generic document, do a fine job. And I think what we're really talking about, perhaps, is execution, maybe you're disagreeing over execution, and Peter could address that more, but I guess from my standpoint, I don't have a problem with the standards as written.
No.
They seem rather thoughtful and pretty well balanced.
The part I have a problem with is arbitrarily setting 4 feet that all the trees have got to be removed. I have a problem with that. It's inconsistent with the rest of the document. You're correct. Just about everything says you go and preserve trees whenever possible. But to say you're going to take them out 4 feet on either side of the edge of the road pavement, that sounds arbitrary to me.
To me, that's reasonable.
To me, it's reasonable. And, you know, you could cut it down to 2 feet. But, you know, when you have to go back in and continually rebuild that road, Beech Tree is a prime example. If you at one point, that part of that road was rebuilt because one group wanted it and one group didn't. So at that time, the council said, fine, we'll rebuild the street that they wanted. Well, now that we're back rebuilding that street, I think the cost of that has gone up about 2 to 3 times. So you got to look at what the cost is, and I like my trees too, but you have to manage them. And we talk about messing with tree roots. Over time, if you keep cutting those long enough, the tree dies. So, you know, what did you accomplish long-term at the end of the road? The tree still died.
They have roots go the other way.
Doesn't make any
They
difference.
do. But now, I'm not arguing. I think, Fred, you're right. The 4 feet, I don't think that's an issue right now because I think it's all been cut back. I think the issue is where we have the stormwater management areas that we're putting in now. Like East Dogwood's a stormwater management issue out there. They took that whole section out and put in a ditch. It's basically what it is. That's where people look and see it to be, you know, like just tearing down, taking everything out. Same thing on Fairway. The tree or two that were, you know, hurting the road, I could live with taking those out. But then when we took everything else out to put in the swell, it doesn't look good. And it really got the neighborhood up, and it became a big issue. And it still is. So I think we need to look at other ways to do our stormwater management, maybe channel it away from to an area that's not forested like that. And so look for some options there. I think we got options, folks. And I don't think they'll be that expensive.
Well, if you look at the lower end of Chickahawk where we had a trail there, we had water all over the place there. And now you'd never know there was a problem.
Well, if you look, and that's another question, you know, we had the stormwater, whatever, those guys were studying all that stormwater, is that still in operation?
Part of that team was Coastal Studies Institute.
They're still in?
Yes.
They're still doing that for us? Because I see those things out on a couple of them still out at
They're
the street.
still doing stormwater study work.
Okay, good.
We've got.
Did we get a report?
We did.
Good. You just talked about that intersection right there going to Chickahawk. Where we put those curbs in went right down in that guy's house. Remember? The first one on the right?
But that
Trinity?
got corrected.
He corrected it. We didn't. It was our mistake because we channeled all that water right down the road and it went right around.
Is that the one that just dug the?
We dug a little
No,
trench
he
there.
dug out, he took that and we didn't know about it.
But the thing is, we put stormwater on him and that's on us. So-
I understand, but you take a look at that total
And
project.
since there, he's raised his driveway and put in a swell out in
Well, I
front
don't
of
know
his
who put
house.
the swell in, questionable.
Can we go
town-
back to the
we did,
generic?
but anyway.
Go away from
We're
specific.
getting
We got
away from
options.
we're getting away from the issue here, but Chickahawk Trail was a mess. And there were a lot of trees, the lower end of it had to be taken out, and there's a drainage system is in there, if you remember correctly. But that, when we first looked at that and you saw that project being completed, you'd have thought that it was a war zone.
That's right.
But look at it now, you know, which is what, 5, 6 years later. Canopy's coming back in.
It's already come back.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to say one thing. I've heard mostly negative things about our street standards and our rebuild standards. from the people in this room quite often, but when I talk to the people that live in our town, the majority of those people say they're more than pleased with the job we're doing, with the way the streets are being handled and taken care of. The great majority that approach me and mention anything say they're in favor of what we're doing. Now, I realize that in some areas, it's not very well received, but the fact of the matter is, most of our residents, I firmly believe, are encouraged by the fact we're trying to maintain the infrastructure, maintain their town in a way that they can enjoy it and enjoy driving on the street instead of having to worry about being pushed off the road by bumps. I think people are really, the majority of our residents are pretty positive about this. Not all of them, but the majority of them. And I certainly feel very comfortable with it. I work with the team that put these standards together, these ones we have right now, and it was done with some real tree huggers in the group. I'm telling you, that fought tooth and nail to have it worded a certain way. We finally got it where we felt it was fair and reasonable, and I think we've been, for the most part, pretty careful about it. I think we need to move on to more business. If we can address this in some way, unless somebody has more questions, I'll let them go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that, really.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
You said one thing that, I have to disagree with you. You said the majority of people in this community.
No, I said the majority of the ones that talk to me.
Okay, good. I wanted that clarified because the majority, I don't think, agree with that.
I don't.
That's so subjective, it's tough to tell.
That's subjective, what you call majority.
Just,
I mean, we had our lower end of Spindrift rebuilt. Majority of them were in favor, but,
you can't say the majority agree with that.
That's not what he said.
well, we're getting into semantics here.
It is what he said.
Yeah, we're getting into semantics, so let's move on.
Well, that's what got us here. Gentleman has a question back there. Would you recognize him?
No.
Okay.
We'll address your question at the public forum, whoever had that question.
Okay, next.
Council, do we have any action you want to take on this particular question or not, on this particular issue?
No, I don't see any.
I think it ought to go back to committee and come back with some standards that are consistent and not arbitrary. I think they're very arbitrary.
You want to make a motion to that effect, Fred?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that the standards be reconsidered so that they're more environmental friendly and come back for council for review.
Do I have a second?
State it again, Fred. Who are you
Okay.
going to send it back to?
The Capital Improvement Planning Committee, I believe that, CIP, is that what it's called? Send it back and ask them to reevaluate it and make them more environmental friendly and come back.
Would you send it to them or to planning? Because they're code enforcement. I'm just trying to get that where we should send it.
I'll ask the town manager what's the most appropriate place to send it.
And how
I would say to you that last fiscal year, the standards came to the council as a recommendation in July with the recommended capital improvement projects for the year. The council considered the recommendation of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee at that time. And that's what they recommended at that time. I'm not sure that you can charge the Capital Improvement Planning Committee with coming up with something more environmentally friendly with their level of expertise, which I've set on myself. I think you need to have somebody else, such as a professional engineer, if you want to change standards that have technical aspects to it like that. That's just a response. But that's how last year the standards came as a recommendation to the council in July with the Capital Improvement Planning Committee's recommendation for the fiscal year. You are going to be getting information presumably from engineering firms that are going to answer, hopefully, presumably answer the RFQ process. You know, I know you have an interest in seeing them change, but I would recommend that you wait till you get a engineer on staff that you pick, that this council has contracted with to do something like that.
That makes
I
sense.
just don't think you're going to get a result by sending it to a town, one of our existing committees, because we
Okay.
don't have the expertise.
All right, I agree. I'd rather have a professional input as well. So I'll say we table it until we get a new, or a town engineer on board, new contract.
You want to table your motion?
Yeah, I'll table it, but I will bring it up again.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I am comfortable with the draft language, or the language that's in place. So I'd like to make a motion we accept or re-accept, because I guess it sounds like a year or so ago it was accepted before, that we reauthorize these standards.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any further discussion?
Well, I think you need to highlight preservation of existing trees and maximize the preservation of existing trees. And I think you need to wait until we have a professional to review these standards, because there seems to be some issues with them, the way they're being implemented.
I agree.
No, we got a motion.
Any other discussion about this? I would suggest we keep them in place until we have this new engineer come aboard.
Well, it's in place.
Well, let's keep it in place. Let's just make sure we.
Yeah, that's what I said. Let's table it until you get the,
Just table the
engineer-
discussion. I
yeah,
understand. I
yeah.
understand. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're
Well,
going to
well, you got.
table the discussion.
you-
No, wait.
No,
What was
you
the
got-
motion you're asking? I had a motion on the table.
Yeah, you do, I'm sorry. But Chris has a motion on the floor to maintain these existing standards.
Correct. That doesn't
That's
mean they
been-
can't change in the
And
future.
that's been seconded by Mr. Holland.
Correct.
And I called for a vote on that, which would have just done just that. You made a motion, Fred, now, I tabled your motion,
I tabled mine.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
But as I understand, we've just approved a motion by a vote of
Let's
3-2.
revote it to make sure. Let's make sure it's clear. So,
Let's just leave them alone.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just leave them
That's what
alone.
we're doing.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. That's what
You don't have
we're
to do
doing.
anything. You don't have to take any action.
Well, let's just take an action. That was the point. Just take an
Chris
action.
made a motion.
You don't need a motion to
You don't need
keep
a
what you
motion.
got.
They're in place.
Can I
Understood.
make a comment from the clerk's point of view for the clerk? You called for a vote, and there were 3 ayes in the
Right,
vote.
that's right.
So
You didn't ask.
You need
The
to,
motion-
you need to call for the negative vote,
Then you got to call for then you got to call for those opposed. Call for those opposed.
I think if you call for the negative vote.
All opposed?
it'll be done.
That last motion? Thank you. Motion's been made and carried. Thank you.
I think it's out of order.
Okay, let's move on. Jesus Christ.
Voting on something you already have in place.
Well, we voted it,
Voted on a
let's go
motion
on.
Mr. Mason made.
I felt it was necessary to reauthorize it.
That's great.
You didn't have to vote for it. It's
I
okay.
didn't.
Planning Board Chairman. Sam, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Tonight, I'd like to report on conditional use permit 1601, which is related to the Marketplace site redevelopment submitted by Ashton Properties, the new owners or current owners of the Marketplace. The site plan that we're focusing on this evening under this CUP are just 2 areas, and they are, the first area, referred to as Area A, is in the southwest corner of the site. That's where the current Starbucks, the Rita's, is in that corner. The Area B is on the eastern side of the entrance that comes off the highway right there. And that's the one that recently has had some trees taken down to prepare the site for any further development and open it up so that you can see the the group development, the buildings better. As far as discussion, the first thing I want to say is that we were provided with some staff comments, and that was town planner, the public works director, the Southern Shores Fire Department, and the Dare County Fire Marshal. And that's the first time that I have seen anything that provided to the planning board since I've been on the planning board, and the planning board found it very useful. And I would hope that that continues in the cases of CUPs or ZTAs in the future as appropriate. Examples of some of the things that we discussed were parking, porous surfaces and their location, heavy-duty concrete and why it was there and why it wasn't other places, truck parking for servicing the Area B, traffic flow, the fire truck, the turning radius to get in there, the fire trucks and so on, awning locations and the width of the driveway that runs behind that building to exit and also to get through to the drive-through on the building, or not the building, but on the business on the end. Possible blockage of traffic due to the drive-through, things back up. Location of the nearest fire hydrant. Landscaping, considering putting in salt-tolerant shrubs as well as drought-tolerant shrubs. Handicap parking for Area B. The connection between existing building and the proposed building in Area A. And then the clarification of items on the actual drawing that we were given. Sometimes the key did not match up with the drawings, or crosswalks were two different designations and so on, so we sorted out a bunch of that. After all that discussion, the planning board recommends approval of the conditional use plan 16-01 with the following conditions. If you've got the staff report in front of you, there were 2 conditions that were proposed in the staff report, and if you want me to go through and read that, or if you just want to wait until the public hearing, and I'm sure Wes can provide those. And also the condition of approving a vesting period of 2 years from the date of approval, and that was the applicant's request in their development plans. And so that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Nope. No, I don't have any.
Thank you.
Thank you. Under old business, consideration of retreat facilitators draft strategic plan for 2016, determine follow-up action, reported from council February the 16th, 2016 strategic planning retreat. That's tab 4, council. Is there any discussion we'd like to undertake with this one?
We talked about the vision statements that day,
We did.
and we have, in this packet, we have the vision statement from the land use, and we have the vision statement for the use and acquisition of properties. So, I mean, Chad even said earlier that the land use plan is what you've got to go by to do anything that you do. So I would make a motion that we adopt the land use, or state that the land use plan is what we use, and abolish that vision statement for use and acquisition of properties. Just do away with it, as I don't see that it's needed, and it's not any part of anything that we are going to be doing.
Yeah, that was a resolution that was adopted in March of 2013.
Right. But as we discussed at our retreat, it's no longer really a part of anything. We have to go by that land use plan.
Yeah, which already has in it basically what the
Which
other
is
one
approved
says.
by CAMA and
Yeah, I understand that. It's been
all that.
approved by CAMA, and it's got all the
to make a.
eminent domain and all that language in there.
It
Eminent
basically-
domain doesn't go away.
Right. It basically gives us the same thing we have in the resolution that was passed March 19th, as far as the
You mean this
authority.
act, which one, Tom? I'm not.
Going back to what you just said here, the vision statement for the land use plan.
Right, we use that.
In our land use plan, it gives us basically the same guidelines that we have in this resolution that we adopted. It was adopted in 2013.
Oh, yeah, there's a little different wording, but other than that, we don't need two is what we decided.
Yeah.
I think we're all,
I have no problem of it being, I don't know what we have to do to recall a resolution, Peter. Is there anything, or Ben, is there anything we have to do?
Ben, you understand what we're trying to do?
No.
Okay.
Can I,
But I think I have I mean, I wasn't at the retreat, but what I think you
At
are
our
trying to
work-
say is that there are two vision statements here. One is
Yes.
in the land use plan, one
Which
was,
is adopted by which is approved by CAMA and we use for everything we do. The other one is when it was just put in 2013, and it's kind of redundant. And
Well,
we're
it
gonna
was-
take that one out.
put in for a specific purpose. It was put in for regarding use of and acquisition of properties, which is not covered in that much detail in the land use plan.
Yeah, but you got a land use, so you don't really need that.
But Peter's got it, Peter's got to comment.
clarify something? I think Councilman McDonald was saying to remove this vision statement as a vision statement from that resolution and only go by the vision statement in the land use plan.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
and I think that part I think I understood. What I'm not sure I understand is the second vision statement, the one you want to drop. You're asking, what do you do to make it go away? That depends on how it was adopted and what it's a part of. Is it just a vote that someone took and
Yes, it is. It was no, there was no, that was it. It was just a vote of the council. So
Then-
equal vote of the council.
then the way to repeal it would be to have a vote to repeal it?
I made that motion to repeal it.
And I'll second it.
And Leo seconded.
Any further discussion? All in favor of McDonald's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Good.
It's gone.
So it's
I
gone.
proposed that back last December.
So let's move ahead a little bit here. Under item B, under old business, continuing consideration of amendments with draft to rules of procedure, section 14, appointments.
Wait just a minute. I got
You
one.
done with that?
I think we are.
I got one question.
I do too.
All right, well, let's go back to that.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I thought we had addressed all we had to address there.
We abolished that resolution and
Right.
that second vision statement.
Right.
But are you saying that we are adopting this strategic plan because at the retreat by consensus, we came up with it? So as far as I'm concerned, or what I understand, this is a strategic plan that we're going to use for the town. Is that correct?
Do we need to adopt it, Tom, or what do we?
I
need
don't
to
know
do?
the answer to that.
Well, ask,
Well, we got a lawyer here.
Yeah, we need to adopt this, or just- or what do we, what's the,
I would imagine we're going to have to adopt it.
do we want to adopt it at this meeting?
I don't think that there's any legal requirement to have or to create or to adopt a strategic plan. I think that's a decision that you're making, and that it's just like any other resolution. Essentially, if you as a body would like to vote to affirm, to say that this is the strategic plan that you're going to use, I don't think that there's a problem with that. I think if there's a consensus that this is the strategic plan that you're going to use, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think the only thing that I would say is that, if you adopt it, you may want to say that it doesn't include the language draft in it anymore, or the languages where it's noted that it was drafted by the facilitator. But as far as mechanisms for adopting it, I think if you would like to do it, you can certainly do it by motion, and that would be the clearest methodology of showing that that is what the council would like to do.
I got it. You want a motion?
Well, my thought about this was we might want to consider it further and have time for discussion. We can do that tonight if you
No,
want to.
well, I think we're trying to figure out if we should adopt it, and I'd move that we adopt it and remove the, reword it to remove draft and who the facilitator was.
I agree with you.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Leah,
You,
I have, and I know she drafted this, could we remove "and welcoming business and residential growth" out of that? It seems to me that that doesn't need to be in there when I read that mission statement, and I'm looking at all of them. It just needs to say to provide the highest quality of life through essential infrastructure, public safety, recreation within the parameters of fiscally responsible and transparent government. I think that's just too wordy, adding that "and welcoming business and residential growth." Would you go along with that, taking that out of each page also?
I agree.
I think she
Well,
just
we've
put
only
it-
got,
I think she just put it in there just.
we've got it in one, two,
All of them basically, that's just
we've got it in three
take
places
them
there.
out of all of them.
Where, well, we've got it in goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3.
That's what I know.
Goal 4 doesn't have it.
It's all the same.
Yes, it does. yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it
This is
does.
goal 4.
It's just that she highlighted.
Strike that.
I want to strike that part because it does,
I have no problem with
I
that.
don't think it has any, it adds anything to it.
In other words, just strike the mission statement, basically.
No,
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 Just
no.
welcoming business and residential growth. And then the new drafted by facilitator.
I got you.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
All right, I second your motion then.
Okay.
One other minor issue that I noticed
sir.
is that there's a table column for deadlines and progress that does not have any deadlines.
Well, I
So
think that's something we gotta figure
I'm not sure if
out.
that's something you're going to adopt tonight, or
that's
if you
not gonna be adopted.
would want to designate someone to provide you with some proposed deadlines that you could adopt at a later date.
Well, it tells us that on the left side right there, responsible party. Isn't that what that's saying?
Well, I think that's the responsible party for who's
Yeah.
going to do the work.
Yeah, but they
I
need-
think the council ends up deciding in the
When they
long
want it
run
to be done.
when they
What-
want it to be done by.
I mean, this is kind of my impression is this is kind of a living document. I
That's
mean,
the way
it's-
I look at it.
So it gives us something to work from, and we're all agreeing that we like what we got out of the retreat. And this kind of brings it all together. So it doesn't bother me that there's no deadline or progress date to it at this time. It just says that we agree with what we kind
We're
of
gonna work toward this.
work towards it, and it's a common goal.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw that they were not
Thank you,
in there.
Chris. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
We have a motion and a second, right?
Yes, we do.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now we can go to item B under Section 7. Continuing consideration of amendments with the draft to Rules of Procedure, Section 14, appointments. The history here was that in the past, for the past 2 years, the mayor appointed members to the standing committees, which were our Safety Committee, our Finance Committee, our CIP Committee, and our Public Safety Committee, Planning and Capital Improvement Committee, I'm sorry. And the discussion that we had in the last meeting was that we wanted to change that, and take that authority away from the mayor without getting council's permission. And the end result of that conversation was we just take all the council members off the committees, have the committees be run only by the town staff. And that's a proposal or the provision that the attorney has furnished to us. There's been some discussion about this subsequent to that, and I just want to see what council's thoughts are about this. I'll start with you, Fred, if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, I've got a few comments. One, I think it's good that the council approve all standing and temporary committee members. However, I do not agree that the council members not be a member of the standing committees. I think there should be council representation there. Other than that, I'm fine with it.
So we've taken the council members out according to this new resolution that was given to us by the.
Well, we can put them back in.
You're making a motion to put the council members back on these committees.
Yes.
And the only difference from the way we do it right now is that I would bring those appointments to those recommended appointments to the council for their approval.
For their approval, correct. In other words, the council would approve all members of standing and temporary committees.
Which we basically do now for the ones the town manager brings to us, like the planning board and so forth.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Planning board, how about capital improvement planning, how about finance, how about public safety? Those, we don't approve
Those
those.
4 standing committees that we established 2 years ago were to be appointed, the candidate, the representatives of those committees are appointed by the mayor.
Yeah, but we're saying the mayor doesn't appoint those now, that they must be, you can nominate them and the council approves them or disapproves, whatever.
So keep the committee structure the same as it is.
Exactly.
With the council, 2 council members on each one,
Right.
and certain.
Well, we really don't need 2. One's adequate.
I'm in favor of, I like your idea of having it so that if members of the planning board or other committees that could come up are approved by all of council. And I like the idea of having the committees themselves because it's a public hearing and it gives people a chance to hear the discussion. The only place where I differ is that I don't think that council members need to be on those committees. I think that we can go to the meetings just like every other member of the public, and we can speak if we'd like, and we can be involved. But I don't think we need to have any special treatment towards it because the results and the fruits of the committees come to us anyways. So we don't need to overly influence these committees early on. It's going to come back here.
Well, what you just said, I would be influenced some if I went to the meeting and I spoke, so what's the difference?
The difference is we'd be a member of the public, and I think versus being on the committee and being able to steer a committee a certain way. And I think that if staff, and if it is, let's say, another standing committee, if they can do their business without the influence of council. I mean, yes, you could speak, but I think you're right in that it might be better not to speak and just to listen. And that would, but there's nothing preventing that. And I think a lot of us would still go to these committee meetings that we're interested in. And I know Leo's really involved in finance. I imagine you'll come to every meeting for the finance committee, and I'd go to the CIP meetings, and I'm sure Tom would go to some, and you'd go to others. And we can still be part of it and still be kept abreast of what's going on, but I don't think we necessarily need to be on that committee itself.
Well, I see it differently. I can see a council member being advocate for that committee to bring recommendations to the council for a vote. So in that way, it would be a very positive thing for that committee for a council person to be on it.
But I can understand that. I just disagree.
That was one of the original reasons why we set the committees up. So we'd have somebody from council who is familiar with what that committee was discussing and what they were doing.
That's my point, and I think it's very critical that we be on it.
And I'm struggling with that, and Tom, I'm glad you said that, because I think we need probably at least one member of council on each committee, and I'm just thinking that, okay, if Chris and I mean, for a fairness issue is what I'm thinking down the road. I mean, right now.
You've talked about the equitable thing. I'm not sure
issue.
exactly what you meant, but I'm getting there now.
But that's a fairness issue where at least somebody here has at least we're touching every issue and we're not getting behind, we're not getting out. So having one of us as a member, I think, is important. Because, Leo's finance, and I'm going to trust him to come back and tell me what's going on. If I got a question, I know who to go to. Capital, I know, Chris, what's going on with this? What are we doing? At least you know a council member you can go to, and it's probably easier for us to get to than others. So I would agree with you on that, Tom, having at least one on there.
I mean, and to your point, part of what's governing this is the fairness issue too. I mean, what's fairer than having none of us on it? I mean, that versus having one person on it makes it automatically unfair. And my fear would be that it could make an issue that may not be political it could make that political, and I don't want that to be the case. I would prefer to have Peter report back, and that person, and you're saying, who do you go to for the capital improvements? We've got Peter, and Peter can report back to us, and he does this on a myriad of topics already, and it's within, his scope of work already. So I think in terms of fairness, what's fairer? Equal distribution of nobody.
Correct me if I'm wrong, prior to 2 years ago, we didn't have these committees. Am I correct, Peter?
That's correct. Basically, what we had legally was an ad hoc committee, capital improvement planning. And if I may say so, I think that worked fine, that was typically was treated as an ad hoc committee, and it made a report to the council each year during capital improvement planning time. And none of the other committees were in existence, and it was staff's duty to come and report on those various topics.
My position is we ought to abolish them and go back to where we were. From the finance side, Bonnie can make her quarterly reports and report back to us. We can ask questions at that time if we need to, and move on, and we avoid all this discussion.
You take Tom.
I mean, it worked good up until 2 years ago.
I'm inclined to agree with Leo. At least.
Yeah, abolish them and let it go back to 2 years
Look at it again
ago.
in December, see what we think.
Well, let's try it.
Well, I refer to our strategic plan. We put in there, upgrade the current committee selection process, which allows council to approve appointments based on interest, experience, registered voter, and current service to town committee. So I don't know that we can say we need to abolish them. That's just, when we talked about this at retreat, it was important to us.
Well, I brought it up at that time that we ought to abolish them.
We didn't take that, we didn't choose that route.
We didn't choose that route.
Well, I know we did. Well, I know we didn't, but we've had 2 meetings now on this. Our previous meeting and this meeting, discussion of how we're going to structure these things. And we've got other business to take care.
I agree.
And so let's, to me, serving on finance committee or any committee was a privilege. And, the privilege is getting all over the place. And my opinion is, for the sake of simplicity, abolish it. If we can revisit again in December or October or wherever. But let's see how it works first. As I know how it worked prior to. Because I've sat on the other side of the table and saw how it worked. So I'm of the opinion, let's abolish it for that period of time.
I mean, I'm hoping to try to bring Fred back to no council members on it, but keep the committees in place as a middle ground versus abolishing or having one council member. How do you feel about that?
I disagree with you, and I told you from the beginning I did. All I wanted to do was keep the procedures just like they are, except give the council the opportunity to approve committee members, whether they be on a standing committee or a temporary committee. That's all I ask. It's very simple.
I understand that.
And it goes back to council manager type government. The council approves and disapproves all actions.
That's fine. You did add something about only one council member to each committee?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Or do you want to do 2
Yeah.
council members? Was it 1 council member?
Are we asking for a motion?
I'm trying to see where we are when we ask for a motion.
When you ask for a motion, I'll give you one. I'm going to give you a compromise.
All right. Listen, Ed, give me a motion.
I'll give you a motion. With the rewrite approved by council, standing committees, 1 council member on each committee, and I make that motion instead of 2. Does that make sense to you, Ben? I know that's short.
Oh, it makes sense. It makes the resolution much more complicated because of what you've got now is an issue where today, before we do anything, there are committees that most of them have 2 council members on there.
Right.
Those people were appointed by the mayor. he would have the authority to remove or appoint or reappoint people to those committees. The resolution was drafted very simply to take out all council members from those committees. But if you want to keep two, that's pretty simple, because you keep the two who are there. If you want to take them all off, that's pretty simple, because you take off all who are there. But if you want to keep one of the two who's on each committee, you're going to have to decide who you keep.
Okay, so let me do this. You want to go with my motion, leave it at 2 until December, and then we revisit it?
No, I think we
Okay,
need to
I'm
put
just-
this to bed. I'm going to support Leo's abolishing. Let's just move past it.
I think you're wrong on that.
I've got a motion on the floor to
Yeah.
leave the committees as they were before, with 2 people on them.
2 people on them,
Same 2 that are on there right now, I'm going to assume.
just like he's got it written right here.
No, I'm talking about if we're going to,
They're appointed now, like Ben said, to not confuse it.
they're already been appointed. You know what
Right.
committee you're on, we all do.
Right.
Okay, all right.
And just change the wording as presented by our town's attorney. Right here. You wrote this, didn't you?
I did.
No, his brother did.
So my motion is to adopt this,
As presented.
leaving 2 members on each committee.
Okay. So that would be.
That's already appointed until December.
I mean, and we look at it again December, decide which one you want to do. what you want to do.
Then we can,
Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? You certainly is welcome to discuss it if you want to.
I'm good.
All in favor of doing that?
All
May the clerk get the motion again?
Did you read the motion to her one?
Yes, I did.
The
The motion
clerk.
is to adopt this wording, the changes are in by Ben, but leave the 2 council members that Tom has already appointed on those standing committees, and we'll revisit it in December.
I'd add one thing to your motion, that is, we've also got individual citizen committee members on the committees. They would have to stay on the committee also.
Right.
so Gary, you are
You got it?
leaving the standing committees as proposed. They'll, I
We're not
mean,
really doing anything.
without anybody on them, with the stricken language in the end of the resolution, and you're essentially striking paragraph 2. So when December comes around, new appointments will not include council members, but currently they'll stay? Or when
We're not doing anything.
Now, we'll revisit that
We're not doing it.
at December, whether council member stays or not. They may change their mind. about it.
Okay, so what you want on the second page is not
I
to,
wanted the 1, but I compromised.
right. But on the second page, you want to leave the stricken out portions as they were?
Yes.
Okay. And on the first page, you therefore want to strike paragraph 2, which says the council members currently appointed to existing temporary standing committees of the town are hereby removed. So you don't want them removed?
No, I don't want them removed.
So you want to strike 2 and leave the standing committee language as is in the current rules of procedure rather than as written in the resolution?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly right.
And I assume you want to strike this last whereas in the preamble as well?
Yes, you'd have to.
Okay. I got it.
Thank you, sir. Passed 3-2.
Well, we haven't really officially voted, have we?
Yeah,
I
we
think
did.
you took a yay vote, but you didn't take a nay vote.
We didn't take a nay.
We need a nay vote.
All opposed?
I said 3-2.
Well, the math was simple on that one.
There you go.
You didn't have to
Don't count to 5,
be, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist on that one.
Thank you, guys, appreciate it. Under number 7, item C, consideration of approval of a draft RFQ for publication solicitation by contract engineer. I would make a motion that we task our town manager to solicit quotations for a contract engineer using the document that we were given to review, those standards and criteria.
Second.
We have a second.
I have a second. Any discussion on that one?
No, it was,
There are a couple of little minor typos I mentioned to you earlier, Peter, which I'll talk to you about, but otherwise, all in favor of that motion?
aye.
Aye. 5-0, Sheila. We had a 5-0, how about that? That's better than a 4-0. You can't, it's being part of the score.
You can next month.
Under new business, I'm going to ask our town attorney, Mr. Gallup, to take over the meeting at this time and conduct the public hearing for the conditional use permit CUP 1601 submitted by Aston Properties to make improvements to the Marketplace Shopping Center.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, and members of the public. This is a little bit different than the numerous text amendment hearings you've had in the past few months. This is not a legislative hearing. This is not a hearing where everyone gets to come up and express their concerns and their interests. This is a factual hearing. It's a quasi-judicial hearing. It is more like a courtroom situation. People who come to the podium to speak will need to be sworn, and their testimony needs to be relevant and related to the issues and facts at hand. As an initial matter in quasi-judicial hearings, when a board sits as a quasi-judicial panel to decide a conditional use permit, it's imperative that no member participate in or vote on any quasi-judicial matter in a manner that would violate an affected person's constitutional rights to an impartial decision maker. Impermissible violations of due process include, but are not limited to, having a fixed opinion prior to the hearing that is not susceptible to change. That isn't to say that you've looked at the packet and have an idea of what you're going to do. That's more of if you have a conflict situation. The easiest to consider is some sort of religious issue, or an issue where if an adult business was in front of you and you decided you're never going to approve one no matter what. But looking at the packet and having some idea of what you're considering tonight is not a conflict under that provision. The next provision is whether or not you've had undisclosed ex parte communications. That's communications with staff members as well as with the applicant about the process. The cure for that is to disclose them, not make them undisclosed any longer. And the third area of concern is whether or not you have a close familial, business, or other associational relationship with an affected person or a financial interest in the outcome of the matter. Wish I'd read my second paragraph before I explained everything to you previously that I'm going to explain to you in this paragraph, but I'll read it anyway. Previously undisclosed ex parte communications which have not caused you to develop a fixed opinion may be cured through the disclosure of facts or information obtained on the record. A party or a member of council, including the council member at issue, may object to any member's participation for a lack of impartiality. If an objection is raised to a member's participation, that member does not choose to recuse himself or herself, the remaining members shall by majority vote rule on the objection. Do any of you have any conflicts which would potentially make you an impartial decision maker, or have any undisclosed communications or information you would like to disclose at this time?
No, I have none.
Briefly, this will be similar to a court sort of hearing. There'll be statement by staff as to a general idea of what the project is about, and then the applicant will have an opportunity for a brief statement. Then we'll open the evidentiary portion of the hearing where the applicant will present the project, and will need to present the substantial competent evidence to show that they meet the requirements of the ordinance to get a conditional use permit. And then we'll let staff go first just to go through the project, and they'll present some facts as well. Then the applicant, and then if there are members of the public, I will ask for members of the public who are prepared to be sworn and to give evidence related to the matter to come forward. The evidence jury portion of the hearing will be closed after that. I'll allow for a brief argument by the applicant and by staff if they choose to do so, and then the hearing will be closed and given back to the council for decision on whether or not the applicant has met their burden of showing that they meet the requirements for the conditional use permit. So all who are preparing to give testimony tonight, if you will come forward and be sworn by the clerk.
Yeah, I do.
And Mr. Haskett, if you will start with a staff presentation and evidence.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening again, Mayor and members of the council. The application before y'all tonight is CUP 1601. This is an application from Aston Properties. They are represented by two engineers, I believe, one with Bowler Engineering and the other with Quablin Associates. And the requested action is a conditional use permit application to make improvements to the Marketplace Shopping Center, which is technically a group development by definition in the town code. The proposed improvements include construction of a new multi-tenant building with 2 restaurants, 1 with a drive-through, and retail space, and a new freestanding pharmacy with drive-through. The location or the subject property is 5500 North Croatown Highway. I've had Sheila bring up just the general site plan page on the screen so you all can see as we go through this. And the current zoning of the property is obviously C, general commercial, and the existing land use as established in the currently adopted land use plan is commercial as well. With respect to the surrounding land use and zoning to the north, it is residential, RS1, single-family residential district. To the south is US Highway 158 in the town of Kitty Hawk in their zoning jurisdiction. To the east is commercial, C general commercial district, as well as to the west, commercial, C general commercial district. Applicable regulations from the town code include the town zoning ordinance, Article 3, interpretation and definition of terms, Article 4, application of regulations, Article 6, general provisions, Article 7, schedule of district regulations, and Article 10, administration and enforcement. And obviously, the state building code requirements apply, which are incorporated into the town code, as well as the town's flood damage prevention ordinance. It doesn't make mention of those in the staff report, but those obviously apply as well. Staff's analysis, the applicant seeks a conditional use permit to construct a 13,225 square foot pharmacy with a drive-through and an approximate 7,210 square foot multi-tenant building which contains 2 restaurant spaces, 1 with a drive-through, and 2 retail spaces. The proposed improvements do incorporate pervious pavement as recently established in Section 36-207D5, which allows an increase in the total lot coverage for the site of up to 67% instead of 60%. Group developments, or in this case, substantial improvements to group developments, as well as restaurants, are permitted uses in the C general commercial zoning district, provided that the town council approves a conditional use permit following a recommendation made by the town planning board. In granting any conditional use permit, the town council may prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards in conformity with Article 10, administration and enforcement. Before granting any conditional use permit, the town council shall make affirmative findings for all of the following. A, that the applicant has met the requirements of the applicable provisions of the town chapter pertaining to zoning, subdivision chapter, and all other applicable ordinances. B, that the use as proposed will conform with the town's land use plan and will be compatible with the area in which it is located if developed in accordance with the conditions specified in the chapter and additionally required by the town council as authorized by the chapter. C, that the use will not materially endanger the public health and safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan submitted. And lastly, D, that the use as proposed will not overburden the town volunteer fire department firefighting capabilities, and the county water supply capacity to the town, as said facilities and capabilities will exist on the completion date of the conditional use for which the application is made. So I'm sure Ben will remind you that you all will have to make a separate vote on each of those four, is my understanding. In staff's or the recommendation, the land use plan identifies this area as commercial in the C General Commercial Zoning District, which is consistent with the improvements proposed in the application. The Town Planning Board, as the chairperson previously reported, unanimously 5-0 recommended approval of this application, and all of the applicable regulations from the town code and all of town staff's concerns that apply to this application have been identified or addressed in the recommended conditions. Town staff offers the following conditions for consideration, which were also included in the Planning Board's recommendation. Number one, that the following permits shall be issued prior to submittal of a building permit application. A, soil erosion sedimentation control plan permit for land disturbance over 1 acre as issued by NCDEQ. B, stormwater management permit as issued by NCDEQ. C, NCDOT encroachment agreement for work within the right-of-way of Highway 158 as issued by NCDOT. D, improvement permit and authorization to construct a new wastewater collection, treatment, and disposal system as issued by the Dare County Health Department and reviewed and approved by the state of North Carolina. And lastly, E, review and approval of potable water distribution system modifications or extensions by the Dare County Water Department engineer. Condition number 2, if approved, the requested vested right period shall expire 2 years from the date of the town council's approval. And lastly, 3, the applicant must strictly abide by all requirements of the town code and must also strictly comply with all other applicable state, federal, and local requirements. That concludes my staff report. Ben, members of the council.
Does anybody have any questions? Council have any questions for Wes?
No, I don't have any.
Does the applicant have any questions for Mr. Haskett? Mr. Haskett, can I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
The 4 provisions that you mentioned, A, B, C, and D, do you have an opinion about whether or not the applicant has met the requirements of the zoning ordinance?
In my opinion?
Yeah, I mean, have you reviewed the application? Does it meet the requirements for the zoning ordinance for group development? for
Staff
CUP?
feels that it does, yes, sir.
Okay. And does it, I believe you said it conformed to the land use plan, is that correct?
Yes, sir, we determined that they do, that it does.
Do you have any indication that it will materially endanger the public health, safety, if located where proposed and developed according to plan?
I don't believe that it will.
And does staff have an opinion about whether or not the proposed use will overburden the town volunteer fire department and firefighting capabilities in the county water supply capacity?
Staff sent out an email, as the chairperson alluded to earlier, that we requested comments and questions or concerns from fire department, public works, town engineer, all the various departments, and they didn't seem to provide any, or the comments were included in the packet. They don't indicate any concern that there was an overburden or would be an overburden for them.
Thank you.
And the county water, with respect to the county water supply capacity, there is a tentative letter of approval in the packets as well from Dare County Water.
Yeah, see.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Haskett?
Wes, can you show me where's the garbage going to be on that new building?
Sheila, if you can move your mouse just above the 4 new retail spaces, right there.
Okay, and it's going to have an enclosure and everything?
Not sure if it's proposed to be enclosed.
Okay, and what about the CVS?
CVS, Sheila's at the bottom left corner, yes.
Out toward the road?
It's right there underneath where her hand is.
But that's toward the road, right?
No.
It would be visible from the street. I'm not sure. The applicant may be able to answer if there's some sort of barrier or enclosure. I'm not sure.
Would we not recommend that it go toward the back?
That would be up to you all to require that. And as I said, you may want to ask the applicant if they do have any plans for an enclosure. They may. I'm not aware of it.
Thank you, Mr. Haskett.
Thank you.
Mr. Haskett, is there anyone else from the town that's going to testify?
Thank you, Wes. No, sir.
I'm sorry, I missed your name earlier. May the Ashton Properties representative please come forward.
It's Karen.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Bennett and the members of council. I'm Karen Partee with Aston Properties, and I am here representing Aston Properties as the owner of Marketplace at Southern Shores. And as you have learned, I have with me here tonight Andrew Moriarty, who is a civil engineer and principal with Bowler Engineering. He's out of their Raleigh office. And we also have Michael Strader, who is with Quibel, that you guys, I'm sure, know very well. And he has had a lot of experience with this project over the years, and we have found that his assistance on this has been invaluable. Both of these individuals will be available to answer the more technical questions that you might have with regard to the project as we move through the presentation, or after we move through the presentation. As I'm sure you recall, and as pointed out, we were here in January for several text amendments that then allowed for us to move to this step, which is the site plan amendment, conditional use permit. And I'm excited to be here. This is the part where we finally get to make the changes that will allow these tenants to be successful by repositioning them. So shown on this next slide here is the current configuration of the shopping center as it sits today. And then the red area that we're about to highlight on the left side of the site plan, with a click there, Sheila, if you wouldn't mind, shows the area that we intend to redevelop for the pharmacy. And then this would be the redevelopment area on the right for the multi-tenant building. The shops that were previously shown in that area on the left, the redevelopment area A, will be raised, and you'll see the revised site plan with another click. Those shops will be raised so that we can, yeah, go ahead. Just go ahead and click. For the redevelopment of the pharmacy in that area and the multi-tenant building over in area B. The green area that you see there, you wouldn't believe the hours I spent trying to get this to come out right, and it looks horrible. The site plan was much better. I apologize, Bowler, for representing your work so poorly. But the green areas there show our intent to apply the porous pavement that was approved under the text amendment that will allow us to continue to maintain the 67% impervious that we discussed was sort of our inherited condition in this center, maintain or reduce. Then on the next slide, we'll look more closely at just the multi-tenant building. I want to point out, before we move forward with a full discussion on the building, we have not finalized our transactions with the various tenants that are to occupy these buildings. Those are in flux at this point. We've had good meetings with them, but we have nothing solid. And for that reason, there could be changes to the square footage of those tenants. There could be spaces combined that would allow, we've talked about 2 restaurants, 2 retail. Those 2 retail tenants could become 1 tenant box if we found a larger tenant that wanted to be in there. But nonetheless, this is our building. It's a roughly 7,200 square foot building. It includes 1 drive-through window. The circulation in and around this out parcel coming from the signalized intersection would be to move north, take your right-hand turn, again turn right into the parcel and drive in, either locating a parking space or continuing around the building to the back where you would queue up for the drive-through window. The drive-through window is on the north side of the building, the little appendage that comes out of the side of that building there. As we talked about, we have shown loading. It's a little bit easier to see at this scale. To the north of the building, we see 2 dumpsters there. Those 2 dumpsters are enclosed from the street view. And then off to the right of there is an area for trucks to park and load and unload. And if that's not clear, it's just behind the Wells Fargo Bank that we've shown that area there for them. And then the next site plan shows a close-up of the pharmacy And again, on this one, the circulation for the drive-through pickup window would be between the two buildings. So north of the pharmacy building, your pickup window is on the Chamford corner, and then they would exit the site or then circulate back to go and visit other tenants within the shopping center. Again, the dumpster and the service areas are screened from view of the public right-of-way there. And then I wanted to make sure I had covered something. We did talk about the working through the tenants. Sort of the phasing of this, however, is another thing that we will be working on, in that we have to relocate those tenants that are in the pharmacy footprint. So the first objective will be to build the multi-tenant building, relocate the tenants into it, then we'd be able to demolish and make the changes for the pharmacy building. Our next slide shows our design intent for the multi-tenant building. The idea here was to provide an upgraded version of the shopping center, but yet still maintain a very similar character and style. It's got a very coastal feel to it. It's using quality products that are incorporated within the shopping center and a nice design palette. It's also incorporating both vertical and horizontal plane changes to provide interest and shadow lines. It'll have tasteful details. We're still studying whether awnings are a real feasible option in this particular market. I know we've used them in another beach location that we have. They do tend to wear more quickly, so you know that's an option that might change out to some other manner of providing sunshade and weather shade there. But for now, we're showing the awnings. And then on and that color palette is still in progress as well, and it shows up real poorly here, unfortunately, but it would be natural earth tony hues that we're putting in place. And then on the next slide, we have the actual 4 elevations. The bottom right corner is your front elevation that would face the pharmacy building. And then above it, you have the rear elevation that would face the Wells Fargo. Then the top left corner, you have the elevation that would face Croatan Highway. And the bottom left corner is the drive-through pickup window elevation that would face the main shopping center. On the next slide, we have the pharmacy elevation, and I'd just like to point out at this point, because we are still working with these tenants and we don't have a set prototype and a set elevation, and national tenants of this nature are constantly changing those things, we're being very general with that look. What I can commit to at this point is that the materials and the color palettes would be cohesive with the multi-tenant building, but they will want to incorporate some of their more identifying features, which, you know, at this time is that rounded entry facade that's on a chamfered corner. Then on the last slide, we have the development standards that are being proffered with this. Most of these have been touched on as I've talked through the project. 2 I would like to point out in particular. And Sheila, if you would click for me, down at the bottom of the left-hand column, you see, if you'll just click, I think it'll bring a second layer in. There you go. We've highlighted the fact that the multi-tenant building under your ordinance gives additional signage to the 2 end cap tenants. And we feel like that would put excessive amounts of signage in those tenants' hands at the cost of perhaps signage for the center 2 tenants. So we are asking for the opportunity to take the total signage that would be allowed for that building and allocate it between the tenants at our discretion, never exceeding the total amount that would have been required, that would have been allowed under the ordinance. But let's say that the end cap tenant was allowed 60 square feet and my center tenant was only allowed 20. Well, I might say, end cap tenant, you can have 50. I'm going to give 10 of that to the center tenant. And that would be something I could do to make those center spaces a little bit more attractive for leasing and the size of the signs to be more consistent instead of having huge signs with small signs that doesn't feel quite as attractive. And then the other thing I wanted to point out that I touched on, another click there, Sheila, would be the vesting period. Like we talked about, we're asking for a 2-year vesting. Under your ordinance, there is a 6-month vesting, and the way that works, according to my understanding, is that from the day you approve the conditional use, there would be a 6-month window where you had to pull a building permit in order to build under what's approved. If I were to go 7 months, I would have to come back to council and get approved again. I'm asking for a 2-year window from the day you approve to the day that I have to pull the building permit to start the projects. That is because of the phasing of these tenants. The fact that I'm going to have to pull a building permit to put my multi-tenant building in, then I'm going to have to pull another permit to demo, I'm going to have to pull another permit to build the pharmacy building. And I've got to figure out all the leases with these tenants in the meantime, now that we finally got to a place that we've got something to talk about with them. So this is going to take a while to pull together, so I've asked for a 2-year vesting on it. That is my presentation. As I said, you probably have some technical questions that would fall more in the purview of our engineers, but I am also available to answer any questions that you might have.
Anybody with council have any questions?
There seems to be a lot of permitting in this whole project. Is that adding to that 2-year vesting? I mean, you haven't been able to start anything there till we approve this, am I correct?
Correct. I've kind of given my engineers a little more leash than I normally would have because we're in hopes that we'll get there, but didn't want to get too far out on my spending of design fees, not knowing if I was going to get approval from this board. So once we get our plans fully designed, then we've got both local, county, and state permits that we have to get, as well as working out the lease deals with our tenants, which I've been in this business for 28 years now, and used to be that several years ago, many years ago, a lease was done in a month, and now it's easily a year process with some tenants. So fortunately, these tenants are in a hurry to get here, so I don't think we'll have that problem, but it won't be a quick window.
How long do you think it'll take you to get all your permitting in place, experience-wise?
If I were to release you tomorrow, 6 months probably to get all the permits we would need.
That 6 months before you could even put the first shovel of dirt around.
Correct. Just because there are state approvals that are needed on this project as well.
It's a long time.
You're looking then at, realistically at a 2 to 3 year timeframe.
I'm asking for 2 simply because I believe that's the most that the general statutes allows. I'd gladly take more if you could accommodate more. So.
I'd have to look. I don't know. I see it in the application. Everyone does it differently. General statutes usually say if you break ground, unless the ordinance says otherwise, you're vested as long as you have that building permit to deal with what you've got that permit for. So if you pulled a permit and broke ground on the application with the conditional use permit, unless the ordinance says otherwise, then you would have a very long period to finish it. I'm not sure exactly what the answer to the question is. So I haven't been, that wasn't something I was prepared to deal with tonight.
Wes had a comment. Can we?
Our ordinance allows for up to 2 years before they're required to start work. In other words, they could wait 1 year, 11 months, and then pull a permit, and then the clock would start as outlined in the statutes and the ordinance. But they're given up to 2 years. They're requesting 2 years to start work.
Okay.
But 2 years is the maximum. The statutes may allow more, I don't know about that, but our ordinance only allows a maximum of 2 years.
And so
2 years to start it.
For a point of clarification, if we were going to have to permit the multi-tenant building and then separately permit the pharmacy building, would we be then, and maybe common law vesting covers us here because we've executed under our plan and spent significant funds, but would that be considered pulling the permit even though there's more permits yet to be pulled?
would say that one permit applies to the multi-tenant building, and one permit applies to the retail pharmacy.
So what about common law vesting?
I'm not going to give an opinion of a legal requirement that may come up later, unfortunately. But are there any other questions for the applicant?
I have a couple questions. For the CVS tenant, when do you have any sort of sense of when that lease or that, when do you anticipate getting them to sign on board? Because that's a big tenant, I imagine, and it's a standalone building.
I don't know the answer to that. Our leasing staff would be closer to that answer. I do know that CVS has gone through its own restructuring, and whether or not they have found a replacement for this market for their head of real estate, I don't know.
Okay.
That was one of the issues we ran into not too long back, is that they had lost their head of this region, and so we didn't really have a contact to try and negotiate that with at the time.
I have some additional questions, and maybe one of the engineers might also answer those too, so if you feel comfortable. On several of the plans, you note some pervious areas where landscaping is going to be removed. There's some, if you go up to the top, some very large areas there. So that's just going to be maintained as landscaping. It's to the right of the Food Lion, up in the back, and then there's some areas, looks like I don't know what you'd call it, to the left. There's some impervious areas there, and there's another one. Those would be, I'm just asking the question, those would be landscape areas, is that correct?
They would be. They're reserve areas for the septic system serving the property.
Okay. And then I was noticing that you are in an AE7 flood zone, it looks like, if at least in the position for the CVS building. And in looking at the grades, the existing grades and then the finished grades, it looks like you're, tell me if I'm reading this wrong, it looks like you're bringing the grade up at the proposed CVS building by a foot or two, probably to stay out of the flood zone, but is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So would you resurface? Are you going to take the existing parking out, resurface, restripe?
It's regrade.
Regrade the whole thing? Okay, okay. Let's see what else. I also want to say that I do like the connections you've made for the sidewalks, and I noticed them all over, and I think that's great.
I apologize, if I could add to my presentation, there were several things that we did modify after the planning board. They did you a great service there. One of them was those crosswalks.
Yes.
Because we did realize that there was going to be, at times, many more customers in this multi-tenant building than the parking lot could accommodate. So this will allow them to safely get from the other spaces in the parking lot to that building. We've also eased we've changed some radii. I'm sure the engineer has a better word for it, but to make it easier to make some of the turns, both into the out parcel and around the upper right corner of the building where the drive-through is, a little bit easier turning radius back there. And then there were several other changes that your planning board and Sam Williams alluded to, those requests that they had made that we've incorporated into the plan here.
And then the other question I would have is, it deals with process. In looking at the elevation of the CVS, a concern I have is the elevation of the CVS from Croatan Highway. Could you pull that up real quick, Sheila? And I understand it's conceptual, but, and I also understand that you've got a potential CVS who has certain standards. But even within their standards, they've got a great deal of variety. And that facade is quite long. And it is, in its current state, it's still undeveloped. I have some concerns that that is not a very attractive facade, and it's not dealing with style necessarily, just dealing with the details. I understand probably what you're trying to do by trying to match what's there, and I appreciate that. However, what's there isn't great, so it's kind of my hope that we could raise this up another level. And I think that what you've done in the multi-tenant building is nice. Although I do have some concerns. Sheila, could you pull that up real quickly? The facade facing the street, which would be the bottom rendering on the right. Once again, there's not a whole lot going on that side, and once again, that's facing the major side of the road. So minor revisions in there could be made just to give it a little more life, because this is really the gateway of our community. The CVS in particular is a bit of a concern because it is such a big blank wall. And in doing my research, Sheila, could you look online? I had a couple images. There's in looking at the CVSs that are available, there's quite a lot of opportunities. I mean, and stylistically, it's not limited to one style versus another. And I feel like, from our standpoint, this one I think is in Durham, and this one's that one's Chapel Hill, I'm sorry. And this one's in West Haven. There's quite a bit of diversity, and it's not about one particular style. But I feel like when you look at this one, in particular the Chapel Hill one, and you look at that one, and then you go back to ours, I feel like we're not, that component is kind of missing at this point. And I know it's hard for you because you don't have the tenant in place, so I'm struggling with how to reconcile that.
Applicant would be open to a condition that we work with staff on those elevations to make them more breaks of interest along the elevation facing Croatan.
And I think you've tried. I mean, I understand that you're trying. It's just hard. I know it is hard with a tenant that you don't have yet to try to show something.
I'm better off offering you that and letting you tell me what I need to show when I go back to the tenant. So.
Okay.
You done with your questions?
A question for you, though, on the multi-tenant building elevation facing Croatan. Do you have a suggestion?
I think that the front facade of it is quite nice. So it's the side facing the road that is that's not quite as long, so you can get away with it. But the angle you've picked is good because that's how people coming in will see it. But from the other direction, so I mean, I think this one is a pretty good looking building, and I think it'd be an asset to the community. The other one I feel is kind of a work in progress.
Understood.
Mr. McDonald, do you have any questions? Mr. Newberry?
No, I have none.
And did you want engineers to speak on anything in particular?
We would just like an opportunity to address anything that might come up as part of the public comments, if there are any.
And I have one question I need to ask you about the vested right issue.
Okay.
Did you ask for that on your initial application?
Yes.
Okay. Because it's not checked on the application front page, but did this come in with the initial application?
Yes. The development standards
on the same
were-
day?
Mhm.
Okay. That's not something that was applied later. Okay. We can work with that. Thank you. Does the applicant have any further evidence at this time? No. Okay. Well, we'll move. I didn't see anybody from the public get sworn, but I'm going to give the public an opportunity. If you have factual evidence relevant to the decision before the board, you are welcome to come and be sworn and give testimony. If you could raise your hand, and I will call on you. Seeing no one, we will move on. Mr. Haskett, I'm assuming you don't need to make any sort of final argument. You've provided all your evidence and
I think with respect to the vested right period, the condition could maybe be modified. That could include language that states that building permits shall be obtained within the vested period of two years, if that's something that they would be possibly agreeable to. So
what about the signage issue? I'm a little concerned personally about the
The
signage.
signage,
I'm not sure that's a condition.
Yes.
As much as a granting of a form of a variance rather than placing an additional condition on the applicant.
Thank you for bringing that up, and that was a misunderstanding on my part. Currently, our ordinance doesn't allow for other I guess, dedication of sign area to other tenants on the corner space that can either utilize the area above and on the corner on both ends, or it doesn't, and the tenants within are allowed 1 square foot of linear sign area, or excuse me, 1 square foot of sign area per linear foot of store frontage. And our ordinance doesn't allow, quote-unquote, proffers to make changes to that.
But Food Line signage could go on the CVS building and CVS, but you're saying, but you can't transfer the size of the signage to another
Correct.
place?
It would be based on, it's based on the units within the group development. I would have to defer to the ordinance. Right now, for under the sign ordinance where it says for shopping centers, it's 1 square foot of sign area per linear foot of frontage.
Thank you. Any other questions from Mr. Haskell? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wes.
And this time I did catch Karen, and is it Partee? Do you have any other argument or anything to wrap it up with, Ms. Partee?
I don't know if there's anything within your ordinance that allows, because this is a conditional use, you're granting me things that your ordinance doesn't otherwise allow, like the vesting calls for 6 months and I'm asking for 2. So I would ask that you consider the sign ordinance that I request, or the sign modification that I requested.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and give it back to the board. Mr. Haskett did point out that you have to vote on each of those 4 findings. You can vote on them in a group if you would like to. You can vote to approve and that you find all of the conclusions met. What's important is that I have some indication of why you believe they're met. And you can rely on the testimony and documents provided. And another appropriate thing is to, in any motion, if you were making a motion to approve, that you adopt the recommendations as provided by staff, or don't adopt them or change them. But if you include that in your motion, it helps to clarify what the conditions are that you're placing on the property. The 2 issues with regard to the vested right and the signage, neither are typically how conditions go on conditional use permits. Conditional use permits, the general way that they work is if you meet all the requirements, you get the permit, but the town may place additional conditions upon that permit issuance that reasonably relate to the ordinance and to the standards within the ordinance that are applied otherwise. In this case, there aren't a whole lot of standards that are applied to group developments other than dimensional standards. So the sign question, while arguably could be a condition, it's not a condition upon the applicant, it's more of a condition for the benefit of the applicant, which is a little different than what you normally see. The question of extending the vested right, I think if you're going to do that, you need to treat this as an application for a vested right. There is a separate provision in your ordinance for conditional use permits and for conditional use permits that are associated with a vested right application. The key to the vested right application is you have to have sought that at the time of application. And what that allows is an additional period of time under your ordinance of 2 years to have a vested right to build what is there without regard to changes in the zoning ordinance in the meantime. I think if you treat this as a vested right application because the applicant sought that in their initial application, that would be how you would have to provide the 2 years. I don't believe you can expand upon your ordinance to provide an additional time period for vesting as a condition. Again, it's a condition in favor of the applicant rather than their typical conditions, which are contrary to the applicant. However, if you do it, I may be wrong, and you may never get challenged upon it. So it's with you to decide how to address it this evening.
as I understand what you said, we can ask for a motion to approve or find affirmatively these, all four of these at one time, A, B, C, and D.
Yes.
Or we can do them one individually.
Let's do it.
A common motion would be to find, if you wanted to approve, a motion to approve the conditional use application as presented by staff and the applicant, and finding in the conclusions that have been met consistent with Mr. Haskett's findings and adopting the recommendations of staff. And that would be one way you could make a motion. You could make a motion to change those recommendations or that added additional conditions.
We haven't dealt with the vested right application at that time. That's a separate
Not the way I spelled it out. I think that the board may be able to treat this as a vested rights application that would allow for a 2-year vested rights period rather than 180 days.
Any questions, council?
Say that again, Ben.
It's a form of, say the motion or
Can we do this?
the vested rights question.
Yeah, the vested rights question.
Yeah, and the signage.
We're going to get those two at one time.
Can we do it?
Well, is there anything, well, we've got two questions. Can we do it, and do we want to do it?
Well, first, can we do it?
Unless, we can, what we can do is we can vote affirmatively on those four issues.
Well, see, I'm not sure that they meet those four if we,
Well, the vested right, well, I mean, they don't need that.
The
They don't
vested
need
right,
that, but
the
they-
vested right you can do. It's form over function question. The applicant did not check the box for vested right on the application, but they did, at the time of submittal, make their intentions known in writing to the town with a site-specific development plan. So I believe that you can treat this as a site-specific development plan that can be used to provide the additional vested right period. Because they did ask at the time and make their intentions known, and that's what the ordinance requires. As to signage, I wouldn't, I don't believe that that's the typical, I've never seen anyone place a beneficial condition on a conditional use application. The conditions are typically things that the applicant does not want to do. That's why they're called conditions, not,
Authority.
essentially it's a request for a variance within the conditional use permit application.
Negative condition.
Yes. So I don't know for sure off the top of my head whether or not that's appropriate or not, but I have never seen it done, and I have never read a case that I can think of that was the issue.
Can we vote on that one separately? Can we vote on the other portions and then vote on that one separately so that if in your research,
we can have to bring that back to us.
yeah, the two,
Or you could,
either way.
Well, like the four,
Why can't we,
they have to conform to the land use plan, they have to do all the zoning and the town charter and all that good stuff, so if we do that, that's gotta be separate.
why can't
They
we,
won't conform.
why can't we approve it based on Wes's review and approving it?
We can.
Rather than that coming back to us, give him the authority to,
The signage,
because it's, yes.
that'd need to be
I think Wes could bring a recommendation back to us.
he can bring a
well, I think that
recommendation
Russ
back.
testified that it wouldn't be his position that could be
I
done.
think he did. too.
And I think I think the applicant's in agreement that under the current ordinance, as the ordinance sits, that's what they're asking for, is what can't be done. So I think you have to separate the question of, do you meet all the requirements with your proposal to grant the permit? Yes. And then the conditions is a separate part. And it's not uncommon to put it all into one motion, but I think it's fine for you to grant the permit and then settle the conditions in a separate motion.
Okay, let's move it.
Make a motion, we accept those based on staff recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Any further?
Do I have to word it differently?
Would you like to include the findings of fact appropriate to support the decision.
There you go, finding the fact appropriate to support the decision.
And I'd also like to accept the applicant's offer to work with staff to improve the elevations. And this could be a staff function.
I would add that as a condition,
Condition.
Okay.
yeah, afterwards.
After we vote
We got
on
the
it.
That's fine,
motion and
that's
the
fine,
second.
just-
You seconded it.
Yes. I second it.
Any discussion?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any opposed?
It's a 5-0.
It's a 5-0.
Gotta ask, gotta ask.
I couldn't see down there.
And now for the conditions, I would take that from the position of adopting the recommendations of staff, which are conditions to be placed upon the permits, and then adopting whatever other conditions you would like.
Is that the vested part?
I think you've treated that as a vested right
Okay.
application
So
because
that's
they
in there
met that
what we
requirement.
just did.
Yeah, they met that requirement by asking for it. I think it was a misnomer
Okay.
that it was actually a vested right application, so it's going to have the 2-year vesting.
It's already covered.
Yes,
We haven't got a separate motion for that.
yes.
So now we're talking about conditions. And so the first one would be to accept the staff's recommendations. And then I would propose the second one would be to work with staff. Yes.
I just wanted to ask a point of clarification. So the vote you're going to take will be to approve the plan as submitted with the vested right without the signage language that I requested, correct?
That's
Well,
right.
the vote so far is that they've approved your request for a vested right, a
Conditional.
specific site plan vested rights application for conditional use. So they've approved it. So now they're considering the conditions to place upon it. The signage would be a condition if they decide to do that.
I'm willing to strike the request for signage, and if we continue to feel that that's an issue, then I'll work with staff and bring the variance back at a later time.
Or
Clean things up.
it may be, rather than a variance, it may be easier to consider a text amendment, but you may want to consider either one of those things.
So we don't have to do that.
Right.
But I still would like to put a condition on that they work with staff to improve the elevations facing Croatan Highway.
If the applicant agreed to that, I think that that's
Do we
an
need to
okay.
vote on that?
I think you include that as part of the yes. You do need, somebody needs to make, if you're going to add these recommendations or any other conditions, somebody needs to make a motion to do
I
that.
make a motion to include staff's recommendation and the conditional, and to work with staff to improve the elevations on Croatan Highway.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All, any opposed? Motion's made and carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Not yet.
Council, I'd like to take about a 5-minute recess, if you would.
I
5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll come back with a...
5 minutes.
We got before we get to public
I know that, I know that. I'm gonna take a 5-minute recess or 10-minute recess. Is that all right? You wanna keep moving ahead?
Yeah, it's 25 to 9, we've been here since 3 o'clock.
I understand that, but people might want to take out a smoke break or something, I don't know.
That's
Why don't we get-
I'm glad to move forward here.
Why don't we get through other business, let's get through other business.
All right, town manager's report, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Wednesday, April 13th will be large item pickup. So it will be next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow. We put that out, yes, sir.
When can, this is for my wife, when can large items be put at the curb?
If they put out this late, we probably won't say anything unless we get a complaint from your next door neighbor.
Well, you never know. You never know.
Yeah, so,
Turn it on, or,
can you hear this?
yeah.
Again, large item pickup will be next Wednesday, and this will be the first time it's done in the middle of the week this time, instead of the end of the week.
Yeah.
So hopefully there won't be as much confusion by waste management, et cetera, but this was the one of 2 pickups that we get each year. I did want to report to you that based on one of the citizen complaints that came to the council 2 months ago on Hickory Trail, Public Works is installing 2 of the Malibu curbings at that particular intersection to protect that edge of asphalt and for the safety and to prevent further erosion on that curb. The citizen had requested that, and we looked at it, and that's going to be installed hopefully within the next 6 days. So that will be there to protect the street and also for public safety as someone makes a west turn off of Hickory. I did want to report to you, I think you know that the Dogwood Trails Task Force has now published a survey which the council a year ago or less than a year ago had commissioned the task force to do as part of its public input process. I do not know when that survey is supposed to close, but the town, of course, the town staff is assisting the task force in publicizing that survey. And of course, they do have other means themselves of publicizing. And we'll just see how that goes. I don't know, again, when the termination date is supposed to be. As you know, members of council, in 2 weeks will be the budget retreat meeting that you've designated. And the finance officer and I will be ready at that time with the projected revenues and expenses for the upcoming fiscal year. And we'll have as we always do, have a draft line item proposed budget for you to review that day, and we'll make departmental presentations as well. In that particular time, I'll invite, as I do each year, the council to give any direction it would like to give other than what's in the proposed budget. Then that would include changes, deletions, or add-ons to the proposed budget. Intention as budget officer to file the proposed budget on your meeting on May the 3rd. Of course, you can make changes at any time council wants to, and at that particular point in time, I would recommend that the public hearing, the statutory public hearing, would be the first meeting in June. So that would give the entire month of May for the public to be able to inspect and comment on that particular budget. One item also that I will recommend to the mayor for to have on the agenda for that particular day, April 2 weeks from now, is a matter dealing with our solid waste pickup. As y'all may remember, we brought it up twice to you as an informational item. We've been negotiated with Dare County. We have met with one particular vendor, and now we've met with a third vendor. And good news on the third vendor, we've met 3 times now, and we believe we've got a proposal to make to the council in 2 weeks for a multi-year solid waste pickup contract that will save significant amounts of money to the town. And that is Bay Disposal. And I'll have the details for you in 2 weeks, but basically we're looking at significant savings of what the county has been trending at picking up as. As you know, we're going to have to come to you either in May for a budget amendment to finish paying out for this year for Dare County. They continue to trend way above what we budgeted for. And admittedly, there are problems with the pickup, with the driving, et cetera. So we have talked with the county manager about this. As you know, our contract had a 6-month termination. He's assured me that if we find something better, that the county would, he would recommend that the county would let us out of that contract. That's what I'm going to recommend to you in April is with Bay Disposal. I'll have all the details at that particular point in time, but basically they'll pick up on every single day we're picking up now. The cans will remain the same. It will be a per household fee instead of by the hour, which is how we've been able to do this. The commercial will be a monthly amount, set amount, and it'll be multi-year. Probably it will be 5 years, and there'll be a CPI increase built into it. But it will not be by the hour, and that's how we've gotten caught in this particular situation with the county pickup. Bay picks up for Corolla from the Currituck line north now. They also pick up by subscription in Currituck, and they do realize that Southern Shores is a signatory to the Albemarle Regional Solid Waste Authority Compact, requiring all of our waste to end up in Republican, North Carolina, which is in Bertie County, at East Coast Landfill. So, again, we think we've worked out all the kinks in the next 2 weeks. We will have them down, and so I'll be able to make a recommendation to you that day. The reason it will be on the agenda is this is, the target start date is July 1, the first day of the fiscal year. For them to start July 1, we've got to give them at least 60 days notice for them to gear up for this particular to pick up with the town of Southern Shores. They're going to have to purchase some more trucks, take on some more drivers. Also, I committed to the county that we would give them that length of time too if we wanted to go ahead and terminate with the pickup for them. So it will be significant amount of savings for the upcoming fiscal year. And again, this fiscal year, current fiscal year, we continue to monitor the monthly billings. We get them by the quarter, but we've gotten the county to agree to send us the monthly cost, and they keep trending up. So because of that, we didn't see any other alternative. We tried to find another vendor, and luckily we think we got this one down pat. So I'll be able to make that recommendation to you in more detail in 2 weeks. And that's my report. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Yeah, I got one. In the proposed budget, is it going to have enough detail that we could crosswalk it with the strategic plan that we just adopted? In other words, will the budget support it, the plan? Or is that putting you on the spot tonight?
If it's operations, if it's capital needs, it will be in the budget. In that day, if you've got something else that the council wants us to spend, that you want to spend money on for next year, you would need to direct me to put that in the budget that day.
The reason I say that, if we're going to have a strategic plan, we got to be able to fund it. If we can't fund it, we can't execute the plan. That's my point.
Well, the things I've looked at tonight in your plan that you adopted, as far as capital needs, they will be in there. I'm not sure what else. If you know of something that we have not projected for and the council wants to direct me to put it in the proposed budget, that would be the time to do it.
Okay.
How detailed will it be?
It's the same detail that was put online last year, line by line. We will have justification sheets.
Can we have a breakout of?
In the justification sheets, you'll have breakouts as to what is meant by each line with that amount.
Is it possible to get that maybe a week before the retreat so we can have time to look it over and study?
I'm gonna get it to you that week, the end of the week before. The reason we haven't got all the revenue numbers in yet, for confirmations. So traditionally, this is ahead of time anyway, but I can't give a proposed balance until I get all the revenue numbers confirmed. So it would be toward the middle of the week before your meeting. Again, it'll have the justification sheets and exactly the same line item that we've been putting online. We did have one citizen who had complained about the budget format and was reminded in December that we did have a line item budget, and he went online and called the finance officer and said, "Oh, okay, thank you." So, I mean, that has been there online for people to see, and they can see that one this year online as well.
One more question I just remembered. When I was at Town Hall on Friday, I noticed some folks moving out of the property on Skyline Road. Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, the current tenant gave notice that she would be vacating last Friday. So we're still making sure she gets everything out before we evaluate when and if to put another tenant in there. So that's where we are right now. She just vacated on Friday.
Are you planning to put it back on the rental market, or what are you doing?
I haven't made a decision to what to recommend yet or not. I don't know. We don't know the condition of the house as far as HVAC. There's a lot of stuff in there that was not her ownership in the attic that has been there for 10 years, and we're trying to get all that out first so we can evaluate it.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Good news about the trash service. I mean, apparently good news. I have nothing else I want to talk about. Let's start with Mr. Newberry. If you had any comments you want to add on here.
Yeah, I just got one, and this is more for the record. I would like to retract some comments I made in the March 1st Town Council meeting concerning the town engineer's design and the town dredging project. These comments were based on misinformation that I had received. That's all I have.
Thank you, Fred.
My only comment is we need to be more diligent on this agenda so we're not here half the night. Because if you notice with the people we had started with and what we were ending up with, there's a tremendous difference. And I know we want to get people to come to our meetings, which I encourage, but if we're going to run the sessions this late, people are not going to come. So I would ask that we try to make every effort to get our business done in 2 to 2.5 hours or less.
Or less. Thank you, Leo. I agree with you, by the way.
You're a good man. You're absolutely right.
I like the 6-hour meetings. Just kidding. No, I agree with you.
I would have a comment on that, but I might, since this is being
No,
recorded,
no,
I don't think it'd be appropriate.
No, no comment. I agree with you, Leo, on that.
Gary, anything?
I hate to do anything. Couple things I do want us to look at. And tonight reminded me of it. We have a public hearing on a conditional use, and then we vote on it at the same meeting. And I think we need to look at our procedure and our rules to where we do that and vote on it at the next council meeting before we do, to give the public time to call us and talk to us and that kind of thing. Go ahead.
I don't have, with regard to legislative stuff,
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. With quasi-judicial stuff like tonight, I think that's a dangerous idea. I don't necessarily think the delay is a problem, but having the public call you would be a problem.
Well,
And I think that's going to be
But to
the
give us time
effect.
to look over after, I mean, we received this,
Right.
Friday afternoon.
And I see boards that do it both. Most of the boards I deal with make the decisions at the meeting that they have the public hearing, but it's not uncommon to do either, but it's more common in the legislative decisions where you're not affecting someone's need to be able to do their construction or their business, and where you don't have the risk of ex parte communications and stuff in between. I'm not saying you couldn't do it either way, but I just wanted to say that that's one thing to think about.
You look at that, and we'll let you look at it and draft something that looks a little better. Because I think we're having a public hearing, and then we're deciding just like that on something without time to really look into. And Chris had some great questions tonight on this issue. But,
But
where are you gonna put the, I still have questions on the dumpster on that side, right there when you're coming in the road. I don't care if it's screened. If you go through that McDonald's and hit the drive-through, you see how it's wide open and nasty. And I'm just thinking everything else is back out of the way on that, and when you go in the marketplace, you don't see that. So just as that. The other thing is in chapter 14 on our rules, there's a thing in there where it says the planning board can solicit funds. And I think we need to look at that and correct it, because I think I don't know when it was put in there or why it's in there, but I don't know why our planning board would be able to solicit funds if you look at that. So anyway, I wanted to bring those two items up that we need to review and correct. Other than that, thank you guys for being here tonight.
Thank you, Gary. I want to ask you, counsel, do you want to take a brief recess and do the forum, or do you want to do the public forum right now?
Well, the public's starting to look tired to me.
You guys okay to go ahead and just start the public forum?
Yeah.
Have a,
You You can address the town, you raise your hand, I'll call on you, there are no 3-minute rules, but you have respect for each other, obviously, mixed in there somewhere. Does anyone like to speak? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, may I use the restroom?
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to diminish your question. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, go ahead.
You're welcome to speak.
Oh, okay. I want to say that I support Mr. McDonald's proposal to have public hearings on legislation and then a vote at a subsequent meeting, because I think that does give the council the opportunity to reflect on what the public says, and it also sends a good message to the public that when they take the time to come up here and make their comments, that the council takes their time, or its time, to reflect on what they have to say. So I hope that the council takes that up at another point. One other thing is that when the council takes up the issue again of council members participating or being members of standing committees, I think that is a great idea because it provides checks and balance to this bifurcated form of government. And I think that for the council to abdicate that authority and participation on these committees just sets a bad precedent, and it creates bad government. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Patrick Gilbert, and I live at 44 Skyline Road.
Patrick, I want to make just one comment about what you said about delaying the voting. I think that's fine if it's a non-judicial type hearing, where we've called somebody in from Charlotte, for example, to get a decision, like tonight. I would not personally want to bring them back from Charlotte or Raleigh to have us make a vote yes or no. I just think that's not fair to the applicant. I think in a non-judicial type hearing, where it's just a fairly minor change we're considering, I agree with that.
Well, I go to the special counsel hearing on the event houses. Mm-hmm. You had the public hearing, right. Then you came back another time and you discussed it and voted on it. I think that's the way that these kinds of things should be followed. I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Mr. Gallup has said about quasi-judicial ordinances. But for the extent possible that you can separate public hearings and the council's vote on legislation, I think that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add to that? Because, they're for-profit. I mean, the bottom line is they're a business. Right. They're being paid to come out here, so if they have to come back, they just have to come back. Yeah. I mean, it's not her first time here. So I don't think we should consider that as an inconvenience for them. And I know they may look at it that way, but the other side of it is that's their job.
And just, again, I think you can do it either way, and I think that there are more dangers to the quasi-judicial. And I will add, from a personal experience representing people who are not either the council or the developer, but a neighbor who's hired an attorney to address a developer issue and had to hire experts. I've recently had an issue where they had to go to 3 or 4 meetings that are 5 hours long and pay attorneys to go. And if there was a decision that had been made the first night, my client would have, unfortunately for me, saved a fair amount of money. But so it's just something to throw out there to keep in mind that everyone, particularly in the quasi-judicial realm where there's a decision that makes something happen, that there are other people too who have the costs associated with them. Just because I have that experience, I wanted to let you know about it.
But isn't part of the challenge that it's really in the same month that the planning board votes on it, that council's voting on it. So that window has just gotten shortened. And to your point, I had to come in to get the plans. And I know they were online after the planning board had looked at it, but I wasn't able to attend that meeting. And I had to actively do a little more research to be able to see what was there, even if the delay was from when the planning board had it to the month after town council. So we may still address it within the same meeting, but there's more time for the public to look at it versus within the same month.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And again, there are boards, like I just said, that do it both ways, even with quasi-judicial stuff, but I just think there's a little bit more risk there.
I like to see something for 3 days and then I've got to make my mind up on it.
I understand.
I like to research it a little bit.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Yes, Joe. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Joe.
I know this is part
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Town Council and audience. First, I want to correct some statements that I had made regarding the bulkheads and the trees. I went to look at them when I noted, and I'd heard that, or there was notice that there were going to be trees cut, and the views that I could get on shore did not reveal the degree of bowing, at least in my eye. When the trees were removed, I went back later, and in the interim, I exchanged emails with the mayor and the board and Rachel Patrick and Peter, and I indicated I didn't see any damage and I didn't think they needed to come down. But once the trees were removed and you could get a line of sight and see both sides of the whaler on the top of the bulkhead, you could see the damage. And so I was wrong about that. Now, we would want to make one comment about how we go forward on additional dealing with damages like that. And I would hope that we take into account when those facilities were installed and what the expected life is, and make a very thorough review of what their existing condition is, because it may be that it's not going to be that long before we have to replace them. And if that's the case, with that 2-foot buffer that we're allowed to extend out, it might not be necessary to take down the trees. And along the same lines of talking about trees, I strongly encourage that we get arborists or we get professional input on exactly what happens to the roots, because I don't think anybody in this room is fully qualified to make a judgment there. And it's just like Peter says he's not an engineer and someone else is not an engineer. Well, none of us are arborists either. So I think, especially if it's free, let's avail ourselves of the right type of expertise before we make decisions. On the road rebuild, I have to wonder if we have established a clear criteria for when we're going to move the road back to the center, or why we would move the road back to the center. I don't know that it's always necessary. The roads have been here for 50 years. Where they're located hasn't been a problem, so I think we got to think really hard. If moving back to the center means we have to do other things with other facilities, we've got water lines there along the roads, we've got utilities, it may make sense to leave them where they are quite often, and I think a lot of times we do. But I don't think recentering should necessarily be a priority, because it does have secondary impacts. On the coastal studies, this opinion, I guess, on whether LID was applied to some of our streets, I think Peter indicated that he made an opinion on the Dogwood intersection. I think we need to get another expert. It's hard for me to believe that a qualified person on the topic could have looked at those drawings and seen all of the piping and the elevations and all of the excavation that was going to be necessary to implement that project. You can't see it all now that it's finished. But you wouldn't believe what a Warren's rat nest of piping is underneath that roadbed there. So it's just remarkable to me that an expert could come to that conclusion. Dozens of trees were taken down. The whole character of that corner has just been destroyed. And there was never a problem with water retention or water runoff there to begin with. I mean, the engineer told me the reason he did all of that was to prevent the water from getting into the canal. Well, guess what? It's all going to get there anyway. A lot of it's going to go through the groundwater, and it won't be runoff on the surface runoff, but it's still going to get there. So, if we're going to employ an expert, get somebody who knows what he's doing. On the Dogwood and Route 12, the East Dogwood and Route 12 intersection, look at this amount of surface area we have there. We've got 2 lanes, and maybe they're 20 feet wide each, that's probably right. If they're 20, it's 40 feet of surface area coming down the hill. If anybody wants to know why we have a problem at that intersection, it's because we got 2 lanes there. I don't think we need 2 lanes, but, you know, we have them, so that's what it is. But I'm saying this to illustrate everything that I've heard about looking at that problem of the water formation. All we're doing, only thing I hear is, where are we going to put it? I think we need to really look at where it's coming from and see what we can do to reduce the input. And I think a big place to start is look at what's happening on Dogwood, on East Dogwood, on that hill. There may be ways to mitigate that runoff. I'm not an expert, I am an engineer, but not that kind of engineer, and I think we ought to employ, you know, get out of the box and think about what are the sources, not just where it's going to go, but what are the sources, and are there other ways it can be diverted in small increments upstream from, you know, whatever the sources are. It may not all be coming down East Dogwood, but if we're going to look at it holistically, I think we have to look at the source, not just where to throw the, you know, throw away the water. And lastly, on the committees, I've really spent most of my observations of the committees on the Capital Improvement Committee, and what I come away with is I don't understand the structure. I understand that there's 2 town council members and there are 2 citizens, Elizabeth Morley and Jim Connors. But when decisions are being made, I don't see votes taken. I just see some kind of general consensus being formed, and I don't really know because, you know, Rachel's there, Peter's there often, the engineer's there. Can't remember if there's another party on the committee or not. But you know, I don't know who has the authority to make the decisions or decide to move the recommendations to the committee. And I don't know if it's just because I'm not that familiar or if it just doesn't exist. But I think there ought to be an established procedure and protocol. If there isn't one, I think if there is one, it ought to be, you know, clearly identified. And if there isn't one, then there should be one. I think that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yes, Jerry.
I'll be brief because I was here at 3 this afternoon too, and I'm tired. I heard this morning when we went through that plan that 2 items were selected for review, and one was building height and one was lot coverage. And even though about 80% of the people here don't want those changed. Now, I'm a little gun shy. I remember when the quick take referendum was proposed, a lot of people were against it, but this council voted lockstep and ignored the public. I also remember when the Fairway Drive fiasco came up and all those trees were removed, that 95% of the people on the street signed a petition requesting that nothing be done to their street rather than taking out the trees. And again, this council ignored them. So when I hear that we're going to look at building height and lot coverage, I think I can sort of count on 2, but I'm not sure where the other 3 stand. And I just want, you know, we need to build some trust back here. And the only other thing I wanted to say is, Tom, you know what a thinning cut is, don't you?
I'm sorry.
A thinning cut. If you're going to trim a tree and you shear it on the end, you're going to promote growth.
Right.
But you can hire somebody, we hired them because we're getting a little old for that, to come in and take them off at the V. And if you take them off at the V, you can actually stop the growth.
It's called a crown reduction.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could have somebody look at the roots, for example, and see if something like that is possible, so.
Well, you can do it. And the thing that happens, if you take them back to a certain point, you can kill the tree.
I understand. I'm just saying that I would like us to be a model of the way we do things here when it comes to building roads and whatever. You know, I took the ride down Trinity Trail. There are trees, if you go down Trinity, they're right at the road. They're right at the road. There's a path that meanders behind them. And I just think about, what if we said we're going to go and clear cut everything back 4 feet? Maybe put in that 10-foot wide bike path. What would that street look like? Because it's one of the most beautiful ones we have in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Jerry,
Yes, Tom. I'm sorry.
Jerry, they were going to cut those trees when they were redoing that road. Actually, the citizens on that road got together and met with them, and they left us alone. They left us alone.
They listened to them.
You weren't there, your
No, I
house
wasn't there.
built yet.
No, well, to your point, Jerry, after the meeting, Dabney and I spoke, and then I mentioned it to Fred, but I think part of this building the trust back, I think, is talking about some of these hot button issues, whether it be trees, or whether it be height or lot coverage. And I think, you know, on a personal level, I deal with these regulations from different towns all the time. So when a question comes up, what is the top plate? It's something that I'm fairly familiar with, but that doesn't mean that everybody is. And so maybe there's a little more outreach that needs to be done as part of this to explain what do we have now, and then what is coming down the road in terms of the state regulations.
It's not just the outreach, it's the getting decision after decision made by the council, and knowing that what that decision will take into account the input from the general public.
I understand. Well, and from my standpoint, I want you to know that we're trying to listen to you, but we're also, there's other voices, and so there's always this balancing act.
Yeah.
I understand.
When a survey comes back and says 80% of the people don't want to increase elevation, and they don't want to increase lot coverage, that's a lot of input. That's not just mine, that's everybody's.
Understood.
A lot of what we're doing though, Jerry, I'm just going to address the tree issue one more time. And I think the bulkhead situation on Cormorant was a good indication of it. What we're doing in a lot of cases, we're playing catch up. Somewhere along the way, somebody, I'm not pointing the finger at any past councils or any association, but somewhere along the way, somebody should take the initiative to say, we can't allow this. We should be managing that resource, not just ignoring that resource. That's all I'm saying.
I understand.
Okay.
And then, but also, I mean, recently there was a ruling, we talk about height, building height. Recently, there was a ruling that NAGS had got from the Department of Insurance, measuring how height is measured. Now, we don't follow those rules.
I understand, and I've heard people say if you had a little wiggle room in terms of where you measure the base elevation,
That's right.
then we wouldn't have had to level off the wall.
You wouldn't have to.
And build a big retaining wall either. So
It actually can save
I do
trees.
understand there are some subtleties.
Well, and I think the educational outreach is important because what we came into was the mess about the big houses. And there's stuff going on at the state level. I know they're looking at freeboard. And I know they're looking at a lot of the stuff on a state level, and either we address it now and get ahead of it, or we're gonna have to address it later in an emergency session, and that wasn't fun for probably any of us. So that's why I think it's important to look at those issues. We need, and the consultant said that regarding coverage. We're not following the state rules. So we've got to deal with this stuff. Sorry.
Thanks, Tommy. Good evening.
A couple of random thoughts here, and I try not to take long. The email exchange that someone alluded to between myself and the council, it was actually between myself and Rachel Patrick about the Holly Trail trees. A couple of comments on the Holly Trail trees. I never, Tom, you sent me back an email that was to the point, and you chastised me for really making time-consuming and pointless points about the trees on Holly. Now, I get 3 minutes every once in a while to talk, and when I do my homework, I do it, okay? Cut me a break. I don't think it was pointless or time-consuming based on what I was trying to say was factual. Now, before I sent the email, I talked to the North Carolina Forestry, okay, who directed me, said that based on the information I was provided by the town, both Rachel and Peter, that they had a structural engineer come and look at that. According to the North Carolina Forestry, they're out of their league. They have no right to make any decision on a tree that has anything to do but maybe a structure of a house, if that, okay?
Can I address that?
You sure you can?
Yeah, no, I don't want, you can keep talking. I don't-
This is according to the North Carolina, I'm regurgitating.
Well, no, but a bulkhead is a structure.
It is a structure.
A structural engineer designs the structure.
Let me clarify. If it is already damaged, Forrest, you said, well, it's a common sense thing. It was his opinion that we should have an arborist addressing the trees in this town.
But I'm not disagreeing with that. And if we can get a free arborist, I'm all for it.
It is not going to be free, I can
Well,
tell you.
but no,
they're
apparently there's a free-
inexpensive,
there's a free
inexpensive,
arborist.
hourly.
But I think that an arborist isn't a bad idea. But I can tell you right now that if you're addressing the health of a bulkhead, and if you're trying to see if it's falling down, you're not going to call an arborist to look, hey, I'm going to look at hey, this bulkhead's falling down, what do you think, Mr. Arborist?
Agreed.
He only is going to look at the tree. He may say the tree's perfectly healthy, but it's still pushing the bulkhead over.
Agreed.
Okay.
But his point, maybe I wasn't clear, that if you have a tree up against a bulkhead, that tree may or not be, depending on the species
Right.
and how it's growing, be a danger to the integrity of that bulkhead.
And the arborist may say it's a perfectly healthy tree.
He will say the perfectly healthy tree, and the chances of it affecting that bulkhead are slim to none.
But in this case, they were pretty cut and dry. I mean,
Absolutely.
this wasn't even
Chris,
close.
absolutely. But I will go on to say that now we have someone, according to the North Carolina Forestry, come in, a structural engineer, assess a problem on one job, which was over on Swan.
Right.
Now, based on that experience, we're handing it off to the Public Works Director. From here on in, she's making the decisions. She made the decisions on Holly Trail, and she's not qualified to make them, any more than a framer is qualified to design your house, or any more than a janitor is going to be the principal of the school. Okay, so there's we need, with the sensitivity of the trees in this town and the low cost of getting an arborist, there's no reason not to have it.
And I'm not against getting an arborist. Let me just speak plainly here. The perception is that members of the public are attacking staff, verbally and in person. I'm not saying you are.
I take exception to that. I take exception to that. Hang on. Let me speak, and I'll gladly hear your comments.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay?
Yes.
You can pick out the nicest dog in the pound, okay? The nicest, sweetest puppy in the pound. You back that dog into a corner long enough, he's going to bite you, okay? So for a long time, prior to this council, okay, I, myself, and a lot of people in this town have brought facts to the council that have been ignored, okay? When we talk about, so we can move on the arborist, and I will say that the pictures you provided tonight, I have pre-cut pictures of those Holly Trail trees. Be glad to show them to you, okay? Some of those damage of the Boeing was done when they cut those trees down. Point made. Okay, because I have the photos. Exact angles, the same angles, okay? We get an arborist, we want an arborist, I think we all agree on that.
Yes.
When you get the low-impact design, okay, there's not a low-impact design expert, none, okay? I spoke to, Peter alluded to a low-impact design expert that he spoke to, and I spoke to the same one. Someone is mistaken here because that expert said that he never saw the plans for Northeast and South Dogwood Trail. Never signed off on them, never saw them. When it comes to low-impact design, anything that has to do with curbs, gutters, sewers, or off the charts. It's nothing to do with low-impact design. We took our land use plan outlined 28 places in Southern Shores that we have a water pooling problem or a water problem, okay? Dogwood Trail was not one of them, okay? So now we have trees, okay? We discussed 4 foot of trees. I have the plans. 80% of the roughly 55 trees that were taken out on Dogwood Trail or beyond that 4-foot point. 80% of them. I have the plans, okay? So where's the low-impact design? Now I have 8 sewers. I have distinct video. I'm going to show you video, okay, that shows water up on Route 12, that's this deep up to my headlights, video, uninterrupted video, and you go to my neighborhood, my street on that corner, and there's not a puddle anywhere to be seen. Now we've taken out all the trees that absorb the water. We're pooling water, heading it in one direction, which is against low-impact design, okay? And we have 8 sewers there. It's not low-impact design. Not one expert. I've talked to engineer firms, and the town's response was, well, bring your engineers firms. Well, who's going to spend the $3,500 for me to bring in the engineering firm to say that this isn't low-impact design? Okay? I've talked to the Federation. I've talked to the regional director of the Federation. I've talked to Coastal Studies, and I've talked to engineers, and I've talked to other engineers. Another engineer who does work with the town, or has, he said that should be in Charlotte, that corner. They laughed at the fact that that we're calling it low-impact design. I've made my point. We need to get low-impact design people in here, experts, to evaluate low-impact design. Okay? I'll finish up here. We keep on talking about road rebuilds. We have road rebuilds. Everyone says, well, these roads have lasted, they're built to driveway standards and low standards. Well, these roads have lasted 40 or 50 years. So we went to Fairway Drive. We spent $165,000 or plus knocking down trees that 95% of the people on that road didn't want to be knocked down. Okay? We had quotes, outside quotes, that we could have repaved that road the way it was for $28,000. That's 6 times we could have done that road. 6 times, almost 6 times for what we spent to do some rebuild. And have you seen the water problem on there? The water problem's still there. All the water is directed in one place, and it's one big pool when it rains. Okay? I've made my points, and I appreciate your time.
Thank
And
you.
I appreciate the open discussion.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you? Good evening.
Mayor and
Or
Council.
good night, I should say.
I hope to be brief. Lilias Morrison, 43 Fairway Drive. First of all, it's springtime, and I feel there's a new beginning in this council. This has been a long meeting, but I feel many positive things have emerged. And one of these has been the discussion about road standards, which I think some of us had hoped there would have been more time to address. So my point is, I hope the council will take up the development of an evolution of road standards at a future date. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but and very good things have been said, and I hope that it will be taken up and it will evolve. And finally, pursuant to that, let us keep in mind that vehicles today have sensors, so things like sight and visibility and ancient oak trees can be taken into consideration in this age of Tesla cars, because I feel we'll be seeing these sensor and sensitive cars on the Southern Shores roads anytime. So here's to the future, everybody, and I think it will be a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Willa. Joe, I want to thank you for your comments.
Sorry.
Appreciate all your comments, you too, Joe. Anybody else have anything they want to say? You only get one shot. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
On behalf of Tom Welch, I just wanted to thank Councilman Newberry, Mr. Rasco, and the town staff for their prompt attention to the stormwater pooling problem at Skyline Road and
I talked to him
Route
tonight.
12.
He talked to me tonight. That's all right.
Okay.
He told me he'd talk to everybody else about it.
So, thanks very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Second. Meeting's adjourned.